Okay. Good morning, people. Look at me. I'm a big boy. I'm actually starting early because normally, normally I start a little late, and so I'm starting early. I think Lance is going to be able to jump on here with me for a while after I set it up or do my incoherent rambling where my interlocutors award me no points and pray for my soul at the end. So I'm gonna have my clearing the throat coffee things that happens in the morning. But there he is. Look at it. Lance, I'm a big boy. I figured out how to share my screen. And and so I don't know if I want to play this video or not. There's too much in it. I think Rollins does a really good job, and maybe in the future, maybe if I do this again, because I watched through it again this morning, but I just realized that there's so much in it, and I think Rollins he's getting to the point where he's starting to what would it be? Remove the veil, lower the veil, where he is. I don't know. I think there's a synchronicity happening where it's a bit of a Kairos moment where the things that Peter Rollins normally talks about, which are how to say this, which I think most people are going to find inaccessible because of how abstract they are and because of how fundamental they are to what he's talking about, because Rollins is talking about the lack. His new book is just like absolute unknowing. Nothing can save us, which is about God, and it's about these really difficult to think about because they're the things that everybody has decided not to see, and because largely they're below your self-awareness. They are unconscious, which, if I had clips, I would cue up my Cormac McCarthy clip about the unconscious and about unknowing, and why the unknowing includes the articulable known. Think Polanyi. Rollins is talking about that stuff, but in a really great way. And a lot of what this video is about, he says, what is Lacan's best contribution to psychoanalysis, which is this object A. And I don't know how to say the French, but that's a big part of what he's talking about in this video. So I think there's a number of things happening. Rollins is, I think, he's releasing stuff that was maybe only Patreon before. I don't know what's happening. If he's being more succinct, more clear, less, what would be the word? Less, I don't think he's being intentionally obtuse. It's just less, he's using a lot more illustrations. He's probably getting better at articulating these things. And I think there's simultaneously a rising consciousness and zeitgeist, which is allowing people to understand him in the same way that people have been listening to Peterson and Peugeot for 5 years, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I think I can understand Peterson. I actually just had this great conversation. It's also hard being a parent. This will illustrate why. I was having this great conversation with a guy at church who's just whip smart. Okay, I'm going to stop this screen for now because I don't even think I'm going to do it this morning. Here's just my big, ugly face. And I was talking to this guy at church, and he was telling me how this is where the lines of TLC and my full embodied life in Minneapolis here overlap. And so I have these friends at church that I touch on some of these topics, but they're not, like, these guys aren't actively participating in TLC. So whatever's going on here, you don't quite understand because you don't understand anything without initiation. But I was talking to this guy, and he's begun to get into, like, there's a few people in TLC that if things are explicitly orthodox, they'll go into. So, like, there's a lot of people who might be familiar with Lord of Spirits or Father Stephen DeYoung or even Jonathan Peugeot, but they don't go into these other things. Like, shout out to Jonathan Dumire, who was talking about, he clipped me and mentioned me in one of his videos where I was saying, like, read widely, view widely. Don't just read like the prescripted books from like whatever your Orthodox priest. I mean, Orthodox aren't very, there's not like a bunch of banned books they're telling you not to read, but like some people, because of this things that Rollins is talking about, actually, will only read like Orthodox books or things that are labeled Orthodox, right? They're within the tribe of Orthodox. And I mentioned like I was always reading the wrong books, you know. I would read all the prescribed right books, but then I'd read the wrong books. Okay, Luke, you lost yourself. This is where me and PVK are so similar. We talk ourselves in circles, and it's like, stay on track. Rollins, he's becoming more clear. Object A, Demir mentioned me. Reading the wrong books. Oh, church. Okay, worked my way back. So I was talking to this guy at church, and he was saying how he started watching Peugeot, but then he said recently Peugeot mentioned in a video that, and this is kind of why he's going into the more of the arts and more like writing stories and revivifying fairy stories and fables and that sort of thing. Myths, you know, famous myths and myths. And he's starting to do that because he said, like, I don't have anything else to say. And I was like, man, that is so deeply resonant to me. That's how I feel all the time. I don't really and obviously this is a much smaller scale than Peugeot, but like Lance will tell you this. Lance has known me a long time, but the people that have known me even more in this little corner, I've been talking about the same shit, which may seem new to people if they're new to me, for the last 5 years. Like I was telling my wife this, and part of this is my ego, right? Of where like everybody's big on relational ontology, talking about relational ontology. People are sharing stuff with me from Ian McGilchrist and Jordan Peterson's conversation about how they're talking about the core of being is relational, and quotes from Ian McGilchrist. And I'm like, yeah, I can, and I'm not saying this to like, I'm saying this to illustrate the point. Mostly, there's probably some object A like self gratification in it, and wanting of acknowledgement. But I guarantee you, like I guarantee, if you check the receipts, go on the little corner, go back. I was the first one to talk about relational ontology in the PBK sphere. Like I guarantee it, I was. And so in that sense, like with Peugeot, I'm kind of like, I don't have anything new to say. Like I've said everything that I have to say. It's not really like, to me, it's just like repeating myself. And it doesn't mean that there's not a further up and further in, but I guess this is the natural cycle of communities, is like you need to start creating or doing art or generativity or something like that. So I'm talking to this buddy at church, and he's saying he's just getting into Peugeot. But then what did he ask me? He asked me this question of like, it was essentially like, what is real and reality? And what's up, Tunji, Steven, Anthony, Tayo, Matthew, and what is real? And he was asking me about symbolism and like this underlying material substrate, and what is concrete. And he's trying to talk about, so basically he's trying to ask me like, what is real and Peugeot, and what does he mean by symbolism? And what I explained to him, or tried to explain, because simultaneously all of my children would keep coming up to me, because this is in the middle of like church coffee hour, and asking me questions like, can we get this bread for the, Paschal bake sale? And can we do this? And, my son's flitting around looking at his phone, like wanting to go because like he's ready to go. And my other daughter is like organizing plans for hangout dates. And so you're simultaneously just like trying to, I'm excited trying to have this conversation, because he's asking questions about my absolute favorite topic, which is probably relational ontology, and really is the Trinity and being. To me, it's like the most foundational ontological conversation that you can have. And so if I'm going to have an intellectual conversation, like that's what I most love, because it's most fundamental to me. Personal stories are probably even better, because they implicitly and tacitly contain that reality, which is, and we got into this because I was like, what we're talking about and what you're talking about is stuff everybody knows. We just don't know that we know, which is something I've said, or when I'm talking about anything, I'm talking about everything. So it was all those conversations, and my kids are interrupting, and it's just like, and you feel like you're spinning, and you're just like, okay. So that conversation with this friend at church was cool. Why did I bring that up? anyhow, there's nothing new I have to say. However, so let's get back to Rollins. So I do think what Rollins is saying in this video, and he's pretty clear about in this, what he would call probably like, the two that he framed were ideological jouissance and this emancipatory jouissance. So jouissance is a French word, and he says it's a technical continental philosophy term about which the English translation is enjoyment, and that's the title of his book, or the title of the video is Ideological Enjoyment. And I also put in the description this link to Todd McGowan, which I have not watched yet, but I know the little I've watched of Todd McGowan is excellent, and Rollins references it in the video, where it gives you a really good understanding of ideology. I don't know, all these things are so related. Demir is putting out videos on immanentizing the eschaton and ideological possession, and I'm just realizing so much that this video that Rollins is talking about is like, it's just so fundamental, because what Rollins is talking about is the thing behind the thing. And Lance, I know Lance is backstage, and so I'm looking at Lance, and I'm sure Lance gets this. Like, he knows what I'm talking about. He's going to come in and help me out and try to clarify my weird, rambling, incoherent nonsense. But this ideological jouissance, essentially what it is, if I could try to describe it, I'll try to put it in my own words, but it's a hard thing to wrap your head around, and I'm very familiar with Rollins, but it's he says very often in what people think is giving them enjoyment. So like Lacan's object A is the object cause of desire. So what is causing your desire, and Rollins illustrates this really beautifully, please watch the video, is not always the thing that you think you want. Often it's the hidden thing behind what you think you want. And so and he illustrates this in many ways, saying like, oh damn, what were some of his really good illustrations? Oh, so like in food, this is a great way, and if you understand this, you'll get it. And once you see it, you'll start to see it everywhere. It's like the thing that you never saw. Like I've talked about this before. Like I have a buddy who was going to buy a Kia Soul, the Kia Soul, and he's just like, he wasn't that familiar with the car, and he wasn't really paying attention. This brings in salience too. And then all of a sudden he started wanting to buy a Kia Soul and thinking about Kia Souls a lot. And then he's like, well, holy shit, they're everywhere. Like they're all over the place. And he started seeing Kia Souls everywhere. It's just like, this is the gorilla. This is the bouncing ball and the gorilla running by in the bouncing ball video. Do you see the gorilla or do you not? Do you see the Kia Soul or do you not? Or like my wife and I were going to plant a tree in the backyard. And so we started researching trees and planting trees and paying attention to trees. And then all of a sudden we started seeing all these trees everywhere we weren't paying attention to. Right. Yeah, Lance. Exactly. And it's in the description. So what you see in here depends a lot on where you're standing and the kind of person you are. So once you see this object A, cause of desire, you'll start to see it in all sorts of stuff and yourself. And so Rollins illustrates object cause of desire with something like food. When you eat, you're getting enjoyment out of the food and nourishment to various degrees. But then he said you can do things like a tasting menu. If you go to a fancy restaurant, you have a tasting menu. The goal of food isn't really the satisfaction of hunger. It's really about just taste, just the taste in and of itself, not necessarily satisfying hunger because it's small plates. Like you just might eat a little bit. And then he's like, then you can go to the next level, which would be something like wine tasting. I don't know if anyone's ever done wine tasting, but very often in wine tasting, and especially if you're in the wine business or you're doing a lot of wine tasting, you don't drink the wine. You just taste it and then you spit it out. And they have these, they're like, I don't know what you call them in wine. I forget, but it's like I think of like a tobacco spittoon or something, and you'll spit, it's a spitter, and you spit the wine out because you don't drink the wine because you don't want to get drunk. Steven's in here. You know what I'm talking about. So that way you can just taste a bunch of wines all day until you maybe get palate fatigue, and you got to refresh that because you lose the sensation. You can deaden the sensation and even of taste of the wine. And so you got to refresh it. So when you're doing a wine tasting, what is there's like these hidden objects or the cause of your object. It's not in the object itself necessarily. It can be hidden. It can be behind the object, cause of desire. So like very often, and he gets into scapegoating and all. So he'll talk about like fascism and Jews, and he says Jews are like the object cause of fascism. So it's not necessarily that like they have this, and this is where scapegoating comes in, is that very often you have some utopian vision of what you want, the thing that you want, the thing that will make you whole and complete, the lack. And then you will have this, and you're not necessarily self-aware of this object cause of desire, but then the object is this thing that you want, and then there's something that's getting in the way of the fulfillment of what you think that you want. And so then that thing becomes the scapegoat, and that allows you, not necessarily, this is the tricky part psychologically, it doesn't necessarily gonna, that thing, because here's the thing, here's what I want to talk about. The reality that Rollins gets at with his lack stuff is that there isn't something that is ever going to make you whole and complete. And you need to become at peace with the fact that you're never going to be whole and complete. And that's great, the grace that will actually allow you to be qualitatively whole and complete and content. Learning contentedness in all things, because anytime you want something like, this is going to give me the fulfillment I want, that becomes your object cause of desire that actually inhibits your fulfillment of actually ever being satisfied. This is Solomon. This is a lot of the Proverbs. This is like, this is Ecclesiastes. This is what the book of Ecclesiastes is about. And so this is what Romans is about. Romans 7. Why do I do the things that I do? The things that I don't want to do, I find myself continually doing, and the things I want to do, I can't do. This is what Peter Rollins is talking about, I think, but in a modern consciousness, talking about it psychoanalytically. And so then what you do is, because you can't ever get what you want, I can't get no, da-na-na, because you can't ever get satisfaction, which is something I think we all know in that kind of a way, in a mammonistic way. Mammon, Neil. You can't get satisfaction by mammon. Then you create a scapegoat, which is the problem. And the Jews were the problem, right? Why? Who knows? They're the problem. So we got to get rid of them. Once we get rid of them, then we can reach our utopian whole. But the thing is like, what's happening is the Jews they're actually, how does Rollins say it? The Jews are not actually the problem. They're the solution to the problem. This is how Rollins says it, which is very true. Or he uses the example of homelessness. Homelessness isn't the problem. It's a solution to the problem. There's something deeper than the homelessness problem that the homelessness is a fix for. In the same way that they're like, the Jews aren't the problem. There's a deeper problem, but they're the solution to the problem, because you realize you're never going to be whole and complete in the way that you want to be whole and complete. So then you scapegoat the Jews, because then because you can outsource all your anger and animosity and lack of fulfillment on that scapegoat. And then in that it's a coping mechanism to satisfy the reality that you are never going to be whole and complete in the way that you want to be, which is in this mammon way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Lance, you've helped add, clarify.
Well, so I do think that everyone should watch this Rollins video. I put the link in there. It's called Ideological Enjoyment. And so I found Rollins because Luke turned me on to him, 4 years ago, something like that. But I was watching, this video came up in the algorithm. And as soon as I started watching it, it wasn't just because Luke likes Peter Rollins, which he does. It really, to me, came together about, we're having this conversation about proselytizing versus having some sort of a conversation. And in this, I think it's really good, and particularly that last little bit. But he wanted to use this word jouissance, which is a term of art that has a larger meaning than enjoyment.
Yeah.
Enjoyment is a simpler word, but he was talking about,
Because he contrasts it with pleasure, right? It's not just pleasure.
And he was like, there's also, it has this desire component to it, and he brought in the sexuality component in that, like was in sexual desire or whatever. But I think what he's trying to touch on there is, we have these deep desires that kind of, like, we all know, like, that sort of stuff is somewhat uncontrollable. When it comes. But then he used the word object, which is kind of like object, but not really. So these terms are important. And what he talked about is like, and he's using the word ideological, right? So he starts putting in these frames. We have these ideological frames, these systems that are running, that we don't even know we're subject to the ideological system.
Yeah.
And so I'm not well read in this stuff, but we
That's
could
the
see
possession part, which there's the McGowan video about ideology where he goes all through the history and talks about it.
Lacan and
Yeah.
Zizek and everything else. And so, but what happens is this object, right? And this object is, so I think that, so for example, the great thing is that, and you talk about scapegoat, is that we all don't realize there are these things that become these objects that are set against our ideologies. And we get great enjoyment out of saying, see, this is the baddie. This is why there's all the problems in the world. Trump is the problem. If we can scapegoat all of our things onto him, and he's the reason why my world is broken. Or on the flip side, AOC or the government or the globalists, WEF, like that's the, if we could just get rid of this, and we get joy out of the hatred of the scapegoat, and we almost feel as if we aren't stuck in some sort of ideological frame.
Yes, you get some sort of weird joy, though. It's not a conscious joy. Like, you wouldn't say that this is giving me pleasure, but it is, which is why you're seeking it. There's something behind the conflict that the conflict is providing. That's what he would say, is like, no one would say in their right mind homelessness is the solution for a problem. But
And
he
I
would
think,
argue it is.
Yeah. And so what he really got to was, and this is the part that where you really kicked into it here or whatever, here's the deal. You can't really be free of this. It just is what is. And he says you can't even, and then he talked about ideological jouissance, and then he talked about emancipatory jouissance, and he says you can't even try to seek emancipatory jouissance. It just is something that happens. And
because then you'll fall into the same trap.
And the point he was trying to make is this is a reality of what we live in. But then once you see it, what you see is you just need to see the mirror. Like, we're all stuck in these frames, and you can't change. Like, you can't just say, oh, I'm not going to scapegoat this thing and now I'm fixed. Like, no, that's not what this is. What it is, I think, and check me on this, Luke, what this is realizing is we're stuck in this frame. You can't get out of this kind of thing. But what happens is, if you can see, oh, I have this thing in me, but so does everyone else.
Yes.
And so I'm not here trying to get people to believe in any of my ideology or this, that, or the other thing. You just understand that it is. And then ultimately what I think, and this is my simple thing, check me on this, Luke, what I got out of this is like, it's when you ultimately come into the realization of the multiplicity and the unity in the multiplicity, that, and you recognize you have this sort of filter, that it's almost that point where you can almost see that I'm never going to project this scapegoatism, or I need to understand that's there, but I need to ultimately realize what's going on, and I'm just connected to everyone else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you understand that because there's something in this kind of drive, and there's a lot of great comments. This topic is too big. Like McMo was saying, death drive. I think Rollins talks about death drive in there a little bit. He mentions it. That's a big topic for him because he's a big Freudian, not so much a Jungian. This topic of like, you can't escape original sin. Oops. That is, Rollins, this is a little bit of an aside, but Rollins, I haven't finished that video, but I think we were talking about it somewhat privately in like a group thing of that Rollins video, or no, it was in the Grail Country Discord, because he was talking to that, what's the guy's name? I'm not as familiar with him, that younger cat who is now Orthodox, who's a philosopher, but a really young guy. And they were having like a debate. Do you remember that I was talking about in Grail Country? If somebody mentioned it a while back, and I started watching it, but I haven't finished it. So like, that's a disagreement that he's having with this really sharp Orthodox kid or convert about, because Rollins essentially, that this is his whole like Church of the Contradiction, and that he's trying to not build whatever he's talking about with original sin. But anyhow, that's a different aside.
Well, and I think so. Though I think, see, this is actually perfect, because if you look at ideologies, and he mentioned this other guy, I can't remember, it's something McGowan. I looked up that video, but that's exactly it. So like, original sin is a perfect thing to think about this. if you can cast like, and so for example, how people look at that, is it original sin or is it original guilt? Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
the reason why everyone's so bad is just because they're totally depraved and yada yada yada. It gives you an excuse and it gives you a scapegoat, right? It also gives you a scapegoat for your own bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
So even your thinking on original sin is one of those ideologicals, and then the object becomes that thing, right? Versus, so like you might even look at it, this would be whereas you could see inherited sin versus original guilt. Those are two very different things, right? How the Orthodox see it or someone else. And so anyway, even these confessions, even these things, so that becomes part of this ideological framework, and you can scapegoat these things, right? And so, for example, Protestants can scapegoat Catholics, Catholics can scapegoat Protestants, or you can all have these things. This is the reason why this thing isn't happening. Instead of stepping back and seeing, wait a minute, we're getting this immense pleasure, almost this desire out of setting up these different kind of scapegoats. And the danger becomes for people, and I think this is really important, is like when you try and pull away someone's object, that thing that they're scapegoating, whether it be their confessionalism, whether it be any sort of a thing, right? Any sort of, when all of a sudden,
poking them in the axioms or whatever, yeah.
If you pull this thing away from them and they don't have a place to then go to, it puts them in tremendous chaos.
Yes.
They can spiral out of control. And again, it's one of these programs that's just running. You think Jung, think Freud, think Jung. Like there are these things that we came to realize is that there's these programs they're operating on. And so what I talked to Luke about was, and guys, if you want to understand Luke and you want to understand his proselytizing versus conversation versus seeing thing, because he's going to spend some time parking on this over the next little bit. I guarantee you, watch the Rollins video, because I think that's going to be important. And so here's where Rollins would go, which would be like, I think where the difference between proselytizing, which is really trying to get someone to agree with your ideology.
Yes. Yeah, it's trying to eliminate,
understanding you're never like, get out of that frame, break that frame. You're never going to break free from it, and understand that you want to have this higher conversation, which is, we're never going to get this thing all right. Yeah. Like you see in yourself, I'm always going to set these, like what it is you are going to understand. I always have these objects in front of me. I have this focal point or whatever, like I just have this thing. And to understand that that's a barrier between seeing what's really going on and happening. And so I think, how do we have conversations in this little corner without trying to colonize people into our ideologies?
Great. Yeah, exactly, Lance. I think that's completely true. And one of the reasons I think this is resonant is because it's very related to the evangelism, proselytizing thing. But it's so related to everything. We were talking about this privately, that like once you start seeing this, you'll see it everywhere. Because I'm looking in a lot of these comments, I'm going through this. Like Parsons, I would love for you to come in, and because I don't know Lacan that well. Original sin is what Lacan would call original cut. CW, this comment. Is this all related to why many people seem more comfortable celebrating, analyzing an encounter with white supremacist nationalists in exchange with an unapologetic anti-racist? Yeah. Because that's what's happening here, is like you have a and this is something I want to do a little bit more personal, proper confessional talking with you, Lance. See what you think about it. Go through some comments and then open this up. So I, like, part of what this object A cause of desire thing is in me is that, and this has been my thing from the beginning. This is why I love Barfield. This is why Jess and I and all of us have had these conversations. And like, how do you get people to see? Like, this is my mosaic vision is about, like, how do I get people to see this stuff that I see that I cannot explain to you? This is that George MacDonald quote that I love so much is, the fact is, no man understands anything. You just think you understand them because you have unavoidable relations with them and you're familiar with them. But that familiarity isn't understanding. And the fact is, no man understands anything. That whole quote is what this is about, is you don't really understand what's driving you. You just think you do. Or this is what object cause of desire is. You think this is what's driving you, but there's a thing behind that. And then the last piece I want to tie in there, and then I'll bring in a personal confessional thing, is like, I mentioned the other day, I don't know if I mentioned it on a live stream, but I was talking to my local buddy about coping mechanisms, because I want to bring in POS theology and fear here. Is like a coping mechanism is almost, when I first learned what that was, I was like, well, that's bad. We need to get rid of those, because I just want to be dealing with reality, pure, unfiltered reality, right? I don't want these coping mechanisms shielding me from stuff. Like, I just, the cave you fear to enter holds the answer that you seek, or like, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Jung, these Jung quotes that I like. And so I'm like, we need to get rid of these coping mechanisms. But then I started thinking of them as I changed and evolved, as I became a different, same person. I was like, well, you need to love the entirety of you. Like, is your ego bad? Like, once you learn that you have an ego, you're like, well, I need to get rid of that ego, because that's just blinding me to reality too. Like, I don't want this. I want to get deeper, or I want to get into the super ego or whatever. But then I started thinking, like, well, I just said this to my friend, and I was like, what if you could almost think of a coping mechanism as like an angel. An angel is there just protecting you from something you're not ready for. It's the angel with the flaming sword. Like, you ain't ready to come in here. Like, you got to die. And so a coping mechanism is almost like something that it's protecting you from a fear that you aren't ready to deal with. And like, is that a bad thing? Well, I don't know. You're just not ready to deal with it. Like, what's the point of beating your head?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is a bad thing, because if you are not in a place to where you can have some structure and some place where people can help you land in a safer place, if you pull the fundamental core thing away from someone that is allowing them to cope without protection, that person can be in a very dangerous place, up to the point of suicide.
Yes,
right? Like,
so here, I'm going to criticize myself. I think one of the biggest coping mechanisms that people have in the modern world is their ideological possessions.
Yes. Look at, like,
so is it loving right now for me and you to be talking about object A, cause of desire, and ideological possession, and emancipatory jouissance? Because what that's going to do is free you from your ideological possession. Maybe not the pursuit of it, because again, you can't just will it. That's what Rollins will talk about, the radical grace, which isn't just like moving from the ideological jouissance to the emancipatory, because you can't even do that. It's just like the awareness of it and the looking at it is the beginning, which is it's like verbatim the end of that George MacDonald quote is like, the fact is no man understands anything. When he understands that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but towards the capacity of one day understanding. Mm-hmm. And he says, like, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I think this place in this space is a place where we can have these, because people are here for a reason, right? They're attracted to these sorts of conversations. And we talk about people coming here in the meaning crisis, talking about their deconstructions or whatever. Like, the place where this can be a good place and a good space is there are people that you can talk to these things about, where you can realize things are okay. There are people that will point you to hopefully things in your local area, right, if you need to plug in. So I think in some ways, and that's where, like, estuary on the ground sort of stuff for people having these sorts of things, as they break their ideological, because when you break an ideological frame, it is crushing. Any of us who've had that happen to us for what various reasons, like, it's crushing. Like, I think this is a place where people
what deconstruction is.
Well, Jess calls sense making is healing.
Yeah.
Right. So, but not, but not the best place. And so I do think that people are coming. So here's why I think what you're doing here or whatever. So what are we doing here? Like, I think that people that are here for the most part are coming, whether they know it or not. I think they're coming here with a desire to have their ideological frames broken.
Yeah, for true freedom.
Yeah, I think they don't even know that. There's something that draws, like, these sorts of conversations where we're trying to get above. And by the way, the thing that I love about if you kind of, and I'm not smart enough, guys, to know Lacan or Zizek and that whole kind of Freudian Zizek, Marxist, like this movement that happened in the 20th and 21st centuries. But I can map onto wisdom kind of steps that I have is, and it's the CW quote, like the CW thing, which was just perfect. By the way, I felt a bit uncomfortable. Like I would want to dispute some of the things Andre was talking about in CW's talk, whatever, although I resonated with other things.
Yeah.
I got a bit uncomfortable with the group that Chad went into and the way kind of they were talking. There were some things that made me uncomfortable with that. Yet I know why they've landed in this spot, because they truly are under attack right now, right?
Yeah.
So, these things that make you uncomfortable. But I think what we're trying to get here is that, and what did I take personally out of that conversation or that talk that Rollins gave? Is as soon as he saw that I get this pleasure out of this scapegoat of the other, and I get pleasure out of making fun of or watching the woke be stupid, and I want them destroyed because I think they're destroying this country. In the same way that someone that looks at me, who might be on a conservative side, sees me as the boogeyman and wants me or Trump or whatever destroyed. See, it's that I saw this thing in me, and we all talk about the woke church is just a mirror of Protestantism, whatever. It's downstream, whatever. Yeah, that's true. But now that I see that I put this object out there, that I scapegoat these little things or whatever. So what it did in me is like, I don't want Protestants all running in and joining an Orthodox church. I don't think that's not what I'm about. That
You're
being
still
said,
captured by that ideological possession, Eastern Rite evangelicalism, object cause of desire. Like you're not in a real place yet, I don't think.
Yet I'm still catching myself where I did this for 50 years of my life. I'm still like this. I'm just being honest, folks. And so, yeah, I'm trying not to proselytize or whatever. I see some beautiful things, but yet if I'm really honest to myself and my core, I'm setting up Protestantism as a straw man, and I'm putting it out there as some sort of object. You know what I mean? Like I'm finding out, I put all this bullshit out there that is part of this ideology. And I want us to try and get to where I think Rollins, if you understand that conversation, it's like, how do you get to the place where you can have a conversation with someone and not try to convert them or bring them into agreeing with your ideology, but yet have a conversation?
When you realize you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right, then you can have a conversation with someone. Julian, Andrew, what up?
Hi guys, good to see you. I actually have some thoughts.
No way.
Oh, that's funny. I think every person in my life would react that way. Like Lance, listening to what you're saying, I think I'm catching your drift. But I think I've struggled with this recently, is the sense of thinking that there are certain things that are good and that you want to sort of see happen in your community or the world, and like us, and how do you sort of pursue those things without becoming kind of controlling about others or the future? It's sort of something I've wrestled with, and I don't know if I've completely settled it for myself. I mean, the way I kind of think about it is you can have the mode of the monk or the mode of someone with a family. I don't know if what I'm saying is even map on with what you're saying at all, but I think of the monk as someone who sort of lives sort of non-possessively, radically in the present. It doesn't try to control the outcome of the future. But someone who has a family has to sort of be forming his children according to a certain sort of limited tradition. He has to be sort of defending his little group against threats from the outside. He has to. Does that make sense? Like to think of those two modes and.
Yes, but I think you can do the family thing as the monk. It just won't. we just trick ourselves very often to say that that's impossible. I mean, I understand this is where you need walls, but also like right brain, left brain stuff. Your idea of walls can come down, and like I could illustrate a lot of examples that I've actually been talking to Lance recently from my own parenting of, but I'm not going to air out dirty laundry that's not my own, I suppose, of desires that I have for my children that I think is proper orienting them to the world and parenting them and giving them wisdom and directing them in ways. But what happens when your children don't take all that? Like, what if they don't willingly accept that, then what do you do? I mean, this is all like prodigal son stories too. Like you could try to seek to control that, or you can you can give your children the kind of direction that you think that they need with a very open-handed approach instead of a top-down authoritarian approach, because you can't, Graham Greene, that quote that I love to read from The Power and the Glory, you cannot control what you love. You truly can't. That's a myth of ideological possession.
Well, I think that Lacan's major point is that he critiques all of psychotherapy in psychoanalysis, and his point is all the Freudians got lost in their point that they wanted to empower the ego, and Lacan comes to say no, that they've gone off the rails in some point. But Lacan's point in psychoanalysis is to show the subject, like they keep projecting onto the psychoanalyst, the subject who knows them, knows everything, knows the answers, and they keep projecting it onto them. But the psychoanalyst's purpose is to show them, I don't know it. But they don't come out and say, I don't know it. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no clue what you're talking about. They have to slowly get them to see, oh, wait, you don't know shit. I don't know shit. Holy shit, what's going on? But the point is, they come to question all of their unconscious to go, what is this desire in me that keeps stumbling over? And the psychoanalyst's purpose is to draw them into that conversation, into that questioning. And then they form their own language.
Yes.
And they form their own subjectivity to get beyond. And now they see they're not trapped by the unconscious any longer. Now they're starting to use the unconscious. And like you're saying, in parenting, we most see this because I'm like, holy shit, I keep wanting this for my children, but they keep pushing against it. But I'm like, what is it about me that I keep driving into them? And it's almost abusive to some degree, but it's also it's also okay because you were just made this way. This is the world you see. And this is where Lacan's, his imaginary, symbolic, and real, that I think is the key that I would love the TLC to talk about, that the symbolic cut that we all go through, we're all cut into this world, and it gives us the ability to see, but also closes off a whole world to us. The symbolic cuts us, but we can't see beyond it. And it creates this whole unconscious thing that we can't get beyond. And we're trapped by it. But it gave us a world. Like we can't also just throw it all away because it's what we see and go by. But the point is, it's also hurting us in a way. Like these two things, that same thing are happening. They give us a world, but they also cut off a world that we could be seen and could connect us to other people and could connect us to loving, caring other individuals. But the point is if there's a church that could get you to that place where you go, hang on, we all are kind of projecting that onto people, but we have to see our ideological captures are hurting us. Like that would be amazing, and I think that's what Rollins is doing. Sorry, go ahead.
And Andrew, can you keep going on this? Sounds like you know this. What does Zizek introduce? Because he brings in this concept of the real. I was trying to understand it. So what does Zizek do?
So the real is a concept that so the symbol, and it goes like Vervaeke is right on here. Like if you could get Vervaeke, like Vervaeke almost gets there, but he throws Hegel all out the window, and Hegel comes in here. But the real is through Lacan that yes. So you have your imaginary. And that is where your ego is formed. You project all that onto somebody else, but you also see this mirror image that you have on people. So you create this ego. Then in that, but you start to see like this ego, you start to see other people have like other desires going on. So you start projecting onto those desires, and this symbolic order gets created. Like whether that's democracy or whatever that is, these symbolic is created, whether that's your church, Protestantism, Orthodoxy, any of these things can happen. But the point is, and this is where Hegel comes in for Zizek, that the real comes in as these contradictions arise. And you're like, I can't map this. I can't understand it. It's too combinatorial, explosive that Vervaeke brings in. I can't map this. And so it starts deteriorating the symbolic order that we know. Now, what Lacan brings in is that you try to repress that stuff. You try to get it out. Like capitalism does, it goes, nope, these homeless people are causing all these problems. Or the Nazis say, these Jews are all the problems. We got to round them up, get them out of here. They're causing the problem. But it's because the real has come in with World War I, or capitalism is causing these problems. And the point is that the real, we can't symbolize it. We can't put it into our philosophy. We can't put it into our dogmatic structure. Yeah. And it's too problematic. So we have to cast it out. But in doing that, you create this unconscious that keeps coming back and causing these problems in your life. Now, we do this like in our subjective experience, but we also do it in the collective communal experience as well. Like we have to cast out, and then this is where the scapegoat comes in all these situations where you go, well, if this person stopped causing me these problems, well, then I would do that. But the problem is the real comes in and goes, no, you're kind of the problem. Your unconscious desires are the problem. Now that's where desire comes in, and the object A, this black hole that keeps causing you problems. And that's where Lacan wants to turn object A into something that can be beneficial. And it turns into a drive that takes you into greater subjective understanding. But I mean, I'll stop with that. Sorry.
I mean, what you just said was excellent. And it's probably taken me like 10 years of listening to Rollins to even be able to begin to understand that. So like, I agree with it. I just don't know how much utility there is in like saying that to people unless I'm all for it, obviously, because I love Rollins, but it's hard. This is why I like his illustrations in this video that he did so well. Like even McMoe's thing again, up above, like, what if we love control? Well, I think what Rollins would say is you don't love control. You don't really love control. Like you just think you love control. That's like and again, even that is fine. Like this is where like Sherry would say, don't try to change people. It's okay for us to talk about this, but don't try to change people because like your control is a symptom. This is where Rollins will talk about like a symptom. And in French, symptom is like symptom. I don't know what the French is, but it's an angel, which is actually protecting you from a deeper disease that you're not ready to deal with yet. Because the point is to live everything. If you're not ready to actually deal with it and live accordingly, then what's the point of throwing it in your face? You'll freak out. You'll deconstruct. You'll become suicidal. You'll become nihilistic. Because you can't hold. This is what salience is. We know this from even vision. You can't handle everything. You're not ready for it. You are not tempered yet to behold the glory of the face of God. That's why these things protect you from that. Because you're not holy enough yet. It would destroy you. Anyhow, Tayo, Gavin, welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna let Gavin speak because I saw his message in the private chat, and that's exactly what he had to say. So,
yeah, his thing is good. His thing's good. I think it applies.
Yeah. Whenever I say them in the other chats and they get ignored, I'm like, I guess I need to hop in there and speak it.
There's too much stuff going on. I
know. You're getting too popular, Luke.
No, I just can't control the chat. I can't see it all.
Yeah. So I paid attention to Tayo going onto that other channel, and I thought it was beautiful. And then I also paid attention to C.W. Weeks and Andre Henry, and I think C.W. is a great interviewer, and so what occurred to me is like it just seems like there's certain kinds of people. They're just not going to be able to get along. and this is, so it occurred. And then you can think of that as like with my children or between families. You can think about it between cultures. And what Tayo, I've said it before, and Tayo wasn't going to expect me to say this, but I think Tayo is a bit of an ambassador type who's able to go and swim in different waters, and becoming that kind of person who can have that Holy Spirit and to have the humility to be able to go into these different places and not attempt to change them. And they don't feel like you're trying to make them change is really important. Like, these are the peacekeepers. These are the peacemakers. These are like us becoming those kinds of people is so important. And then I think that with that comes this idea that goes against, like, maybe the modern media is, or the modern ideologies, is that we do need to not be so open. We do need to allow for a kind of segregation to happen. And so, yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in when the people who have power want to try and push a level of openness where we don't have, where you would like not have segregation, or that tribalism would be bad. Meanwhile, also trying to promote people becoming those who are able to go into the different tribes and be peacemakers. It's like, it's a tension there. So I don't know how Tayo would want to piggyback on that, but that's what I saw when Tayo hopped in that channel. It's like, man, this is beautiful. This is the kind of thing that is good for the world.
I'm glad someone put what you said in the private chat, because now it just looks like I set myself up to get complimented by you. That's the way I thought you was gonna go.
We all know that's what you did, Tayo.
Just to thank you, Gavin. I really do appreciate that. But just to piggyback off exactly what you're saying is, I know for myself that I'm very much comfortable playing that role of just going into different spaces without feeling the need to change them. But part of that also means that I go into spaces where people want to change you, and that's okay. I don't want to change them either to become more like me. And I think I don't know where it can, there's a sense in which this particular stream, it keeps saying it's not trying to change people, but you need to understand that you've got power in this space, and there's power in the things that you say. So you're just, what you're doing is just putting up a sign saying this is how I think, this is how I am. But by the popularity of the power that you've got in this space means that you are going to change people. And I think that not acknowledging that is naive to a point. Part of a lot of the criticism that Mark and Manuel have of PVK is just not claiming the authority that you clearly have.
Well, are you talking about me?
I mean, this stream.
Oh.
Yes, you. Yeah. Because you're the face of it.
So the way I really construe authority, and I try to say this all the time, is like I think authority is personal. It's integral. Like it's you. It's your own integrity. And this is what I've been saying in the proselytizing versus evangelizing thing. Like if I say something that's resonant with you, cool. If it's not, disregard it. And I think that's just how everyone works, because like authority is inherently connected to admiration and respect. People who have
if this was real life, I would completely agree with you. If this was if we were in real life embodied spaces, that would be more true, because then we'll all know you better. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so Tayo, I think this is really good, right? Because I think this is like because you raised the comment earlier, this is proselytizing about not proselytizing, right? Which I think is really like, I think this is a really nuanced thing we're talking about here, because I think you hit the nail on the head, which is Luke clearly, and I would just think, why are we here? Or I want to exhort people into seeing what I think are helpful things for them in their life, right? Or beautiful things, or those sorts of things. And so Luke is trying to, and I think, I don't know, Luke wants to get people to see things. And it's kind of, if we all had those things in our life that once we saw something a certain way, we'll never be able to see the world the same again, right? Those moments, and I would call those like revelatory moments that we have, aha moments or whatever. And so what I think what Rollins was trying to get at that video, and I would highly recommend people talking about this, and is that, do you want to exhort someone into seeing things for themselves, like teach a person how to fish or those sorts of things, but it's not trying to get them to agree to a certain ideological position. Like those are two different things, right? And so you are 100% correct. Luke has a deep passion. He's a John the Baptist that's out in the wilderness, he wants people to see things in a certain way. He is an evangelist for that. There's no doubt about this. But if you would listen to him over and over, what he sees is he doesn't want you to believe in an ideology he has. It's about vision and not, it's about seeing and not thinking, if that makes sense. This is such a nuance. But I love how you keep hammering this point, and you make it in every chat here over the past 3 weeks. And it's perfect, Tayo, because you need to keep hammering them on this. I'm struggling to find. I'm not a smart man in terms of the things of these things, but what I do have is I do have some wisdom. I've been granted with some intuition and some wisdom, and I can and I've been placed in wisdom traditions that are very deep and real. 12-step group probably being one of the best, right? So I see these things that I hear someone like Rollins talking about, right? And then I saw how I try to grab these high things and bring them down into these simple practices. I'm the practice guy, right, Tayo, right? Like, yes. How can I do a thing? And so, for example, let me bring this down into something that's concrete, right? So in the 12-step life, they don't define who God is. Like, they don't define it other than to point you towards a loving God. And they say, hey, start doing these things, right? Start living these practices. And ultimately what it tries to, one of the things that it breaks is it's trying to break your ideological frame. It talks to you about, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we let go. Absolutely. It's trying to get you to let go of every thinking you have about prejudice of the world, religion, everything else. Enter into this way of life, and then things will be revealed to you, right? And it also creates this, what it does is it is an embodiment of the unity and the multiplicity. So you live in this space where people from all different socioeconomics, all different races, all different religions, everything else, they can come together, and there's unity in it, but there's also this multiplicity. So how do we have conversations on here and push against each other, whether it be a physical, physical atheist or materialist atheist or something like that, versus an iconic vision guy like Luke? Like, how do we have conversations where we're not trying to capture each other into ideologies, but get past? And so what I see in myself, Tayo, I would say this is, I watched that video of Rollins, and what I realize is there are times where I'm not proselytizing and I'm trying to help people see things, but then there are times I'm totally proselytizing you and I'm trying to convert you to my ideology. Like, I'm a divided man.
So to just put in my 2 cents of a question, Matt C said, like, what do you say? Unveil or unhide your angels, Luke, which I think that's what it is. It's like, it's your own confession of bringing things to the light. Rollins has a point in there very much in the video, and I think I do this. Like, I'm not impervious to doing this, where he says, pay attention to when you say, like, you're explicitly not doing something, and then that's probably what you're doing. And I think I understand, I'm not saying that I'm perfect of not falling into that trap, but I'm aware of that phenomenon. And I don't, this is what I would say, I guess, is that if, there is no outside of the generic, and I would say this as a Christian, outside of the generic of Christ, receive with meekness the implanted word, there is no universal solution. But even the thing with that universal solution of the transcendent of Christ is it needs particularity and particular instantiations. And that is the whole mystery of Christ, which is Christ in me. And so, like, in as much as I am accurately embodying and speaking Christ and logos to the world, and that resonates with you in that deep, this is what I'm trying to say, and that deep calls to deep, great. And if it doesn't, you have to let it go, because you can't live it anyhow. So it's not for you. This is like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. If something that I'm saying is a teachable thing for you and it will lead you into greater holiness, fantastic. But the problem is like, discernment is always a personal thing. Like, What if it leads you into deconstruction? You know, like my own, I never deconstructed from faith, but I definitely deconstructed from my Christian ideology. Was that bad? That was a chaos moment of a kind. Was that a bad thing? Well, I don't know. It sure as hell made me who I am. And do I wish it didn't happen? No, I don't think so. Chaos moment of a kind. Was that a bad thing? Oops. YouTube. All right. Anyhow, yeah.
Sorry,
I was just
I
okay.
just
Go
wanted to acknowledge Alan's new look.
Oh, it's so clean cut.
Looks like he's preparing for a role as a retired cop somewhere.
Thanks for not just standing on the corner and coming and setting up some chairs with us.
Sorry, Andrew, go on.
No, that was fine. I was just going to say that I think that's the key, is that's the thing, is with, like, as the universal, we see this opening up. I think that's I would say that Lacan has this idea that we were talking about the symptom, but he thinks the symptom needs to be turned into a Santon, and that the Santon is like this holy man, and that your symptom, like, you don't need to go beyond, like, to get some ideology. Like, you have these internal contradictions that are leading you to these openings that can be doorways for you to see new universals, new possibilities. I think that's where Christ comes in for me, is that, and I think that's where people, like, misunderstand Hegel, is that they think Hegel has this whole answering this, he's got all the answers, everything, and that's not what he's saying. He's saying we are all led to the end of what he calls the end of history. We're all led to this point where it breaks down for us, and we have to step through, like, a new doorway, a liminal space, and we kind of bring all these things back together. And that's where, but it's
like
also hard.
Relational epistemology. That's what Hegel is saying. Because
and
ontology. Yeah.
And that's it. Like, Lacan's like, you can't be a barred subject. What he means is you can't be a subject set apart from the rest of the world. You are barred from being your alone, autonomous subjectivity. You don't get to be that. You are trapped. You are in this collection of other human beings and seeing the world. You're mediated through all these experiences, your parents, democracy, Western civilization, whatever that is for you. And you have to work through those things. But all those things will lead you to internal contradictions that will be broken apart. But it's not to go, it's all bullshit. It's to also, like, in communal understanding that we're doing, like here in the TLC, that I think is a very special thing. That it's, I mean, that's why I think Paul Vanderklay is a very humble, but, like, also a bit of a hysteric, which I think we all are, that we all keep questioning and like, what? I don't get it. I don't see it. But that's okay. Like, we're all led to that place. That's where Socrates was. That's what opens up the Western mind, is that we're all questioning, going, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you see the gaps and raptures in all of this, but it leads you to greater questions and greater understandings and greater collection and greater love, hopefully. That's what Christ, like, God kills off the God beyond to come be the God with us. The contradiction of that autonomous, set apart God, where God was like, no, I'm going to be with you, with the Holy Spirit. That's why we can't give up the Holy Spirit, because God refuses to be beyond. Sorry, I'll stop there.
Chad, Tunji,
hi,
Alan.
Yeah, maybe.
I just have a quick question. I got to get back
Since
to work.
Andrew already. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chad. Go ahead.
Chad, you're on a limited time. Go, Chad.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if because I'm trying to go out and find these different places to talk to actually do some sort of, like, internet embodying of what it is that we've been discussing, and finding these different places. I'm wondering how people feel about me using the moniker "this little corner of the internet" and referring to where I'm coming from. Are people okay with this? Because, like, I'm essentially, when I invite other people, I'm using our name here. So is this something that you guys would prefer I don't do, or
keep
maybe
my
people in the chat?
corner's
That's what I'm
name
wondering.
out your mouth? I don't care, Chad, personally. I mean, I think that would, I don't know how else you would cage it, because what you're trying to represent and talk to people about, I think that's the most
No, I
succinct way to
think
do it.
that's a good question, Chad, because as you go out into some of these spaces, some of those other spaces are a little less stable and are associated with more fringe extreme elements on no matter where it comes. And it's like you're asking, hey, are you okay with me using our name in here and maybe drawing attention from folks who, I don't know. I love the fact, that you're doing that, Chad. That's the sort of stuff that challenges me. And it's this whole thing of this whole ideological jouissance and all, or enjoyment and everything else is like, I'm trying to break these frames that I have of trying to place people in these boxes, no matter where they come from.
Yeah. I
Also, here's another quick phrase. We're not in the Renaissance. We're in a Metassance. I just dropped that bomb, bitches. I gotta get out of here. Welcome to the Meta.
I think along those lines, I think that the corner sort of has to do. I mean, we talked about bringing in, people from the outside into the walls, into the gates. I mean, if we're gonna have a space, you have to be able to talk about it. You have to be able to reference it, or else it doesn't really exist. But in terms of, I think like the corner needs to like do a lot of growing up when it comes to like how we engage with. And I don't know, who am I to tell anyone what to do? But when we engage with like outsiders who come in, and I mean, some of the materialist atheists who come in, you just see everyone of just moths to a flame. And I'm like, guys, there are tons of people who are super interesting and nice and friendly. They get no interest. No one wants to talk to them. Someone comes in and says God isn't real, and everyone's like, I'll reply all. Like, I need to. It's like, is this 2002 again? Is Christopher Hitchens going to come out? Like, come on, guys. Like,
Totally, Alan. But what is that? This is what the Rollins video is about. What is that libidinal drive to convert that atheist and to like respond and like get him?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Well, let me explain what that is, because I know. I know exactly. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about this space is like, and the reason it's a corner and it's away and it's like a secret and like apart space. Is like, oh yeah, if you want blood sports, YouTube's full of like, go check out Destiny, Vosh, PVK already smashed, Destiny and destroyed him into the ground. So check out that. No, I'm just kidding. Oh yeah. Well, I don't judge not lest you be judged. Okay, Luke, don't you read the Bible? But I do think that like, it's just, like what's special about this place, and like, as things grow, like everyone talks about like, oh, when this band was unknown, it was so good and now it's so bad. Like, okay, I don't think that's necessarily always the case. Like, we can get as big as we want to get, but there's a maturity that has to happen to sustain having larger populations. And honestly, I kind of think like when someone comes in with their like, I'm not going to play by your rules, time to crush you guys with facts and logic, like we kind of just have to, if you ignore them, if you just don't reply all, if you don't respond, like, and just say like, hey, you have one opinion, there are 1,000 people with opinions, you have no primacy just because you're being bloodthirsty and like you want blood sports. That doesn't give you like I think that's the growing up that like the like, it's not the what is the word? It's not like the statements that we're worried about. It's not the like, oh, this is true. What's the word that we all use for that? The statements of truth claims. Oh my gosh, how are we?
Axiom?
One of the 4 Ps. One of the 4
proposition.
Ps. Yeah, it's not the propositional. It's like the way we interact with each other. So just because someone enters here with like, here's my propositions, they beat all your propositions, like that doesn't jump them to the front of the line of like interacting. And I think it breaks down our like core of what the corner is when we let propositions jump to the front of the line. Like there are propositions and people here have them. But if we're going to let people in, we just have to realize, like, we're all like, propositions, they're just part of it. They're just part of it. And then someone comes in with their own propositions. We're like, those are the wrong propositions. And it's just like, guys, we've been talking about this for years. And now one guy comes in who attacks our propositions. And we're like, this is, how dare you? And it's just like,
oh no, we're losing Hezzy.
Sorry.
Yeah, Hezzy's going.
That was a long rant, but that was just.
Well, Alan, I think that's good. Like, we need to get to the place where we can, because the propositions do matter. I'm not anti-propositional. I don't think we should not talk about them. but you should not.
But what does that mean, though, when you say that? When you say the propositions matter, what exactly are you trying to say there?
Thank you, Nate.
So I illustrated this in a live stream where I talked about the certain understanding of justification and reform theology that I had growing up. Is it that proposition, those propositions, the POS theology that I was taught, affected a kind of like completely, it led into a kind of like nihilistic pantheism that like, I just like, who am I? I don't exist in that ontology. And so then what do? This is like when the Calvinist, like, are you elect? Make your calling an election, sure. Well, the truth is, though, is like there's nothing you can do about it. So like that kind of an idea is going to lead you to a place.
Sorry, Nate.
I was just going to basically follow up and say, clarify to make sure I understood. Luke, what I understand you to be saying, Luke, is that one of the ways in which maybe, and I don't know if you meant to say this is the only way that propositions matter, but one of the ways that propositions matter is that when you have ones that are bad, they lead to negative consequences. Is that fair?
I think the way that I would frame it as a proposition is potential. And then, but those potentials, what you follow, what you pay attention to, what you keep repeating, and the words you use, like that Moore quote, Alan Moore quote that I was saying. There's magic in that. You keep repeating the same magical words, it affects the way you live.
Tayo, what do you want? I can see it. Well, I think Tayo was wanting to say something. I just want to make sure he got a chance to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out now, when you say that when Nate asked the question, you gave an example of a bad way in which propositions do matter. So when like this corner gets accused of being anti-proposition, that's an example of it. It's even when we speak about the ways in which it matters, it's in a negative sense.
Well, but
let me.
Can you repeat that, Tayo?
I don't know if I can. Basically, what I'm gesturing at is the fact that there's a sense in which we go, yes, well, of course we lack positions, but then we go to spend another hour talking about how bad positions are. So I don't know if we've really got a grasp about what the positive use of positions is. If it's purely potential, then why are we railing against the potential? Is it not the thing that actualizes the potential that we should be railing against? Does that make sense?
So I think when you're having an intellectual conversation, all you have is propositions, but you need to you can't fall into a propositional tyranny where you sit around just like screaming libs of TikTok all day because you're just insane ideologically about these ideas.
I don't think that's true, though, what you just said. Because when you're having a conversation with a person, there's going to be more layers than just the propositional.
Oh, for sure.
Like, sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
Oh no. I just want to introduce this one idea and do with whatever you will. So I noticed that Kale Zeldin had this tweet that I think it only had like 25 views and like no likes. And I didn't see it for a couple days, and I saw it this morning. And I want to get this right. So he said something to the effect like he was wanting to connect like frames and faith, but in such a way that like frames like allow us to have faith, and I actually think it's precisely the opposite. So if you look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, like what makes that a powerful story and what makes that a story of faith is that the action of the Good Samaritan is in direct opposition to all frames which he has been given.
The fidelity of betrayal.
So faith actually is the thing that gives you the power to act outside and beyond the frames.
Yeah, the right brain.
You could see this in the famous story of the four who entered the Pardes, or the orchard. And we're talking about different levels of interpretation of the Torah, right? There's the surface level, there's the mystical level, there's different interpretations of this. And one goes crazy, one dies, one becomes a heretic, and Rabbi Akiva comes in peace and emerges in peace as well. Now, before he goes inside, he tells his other crew, when you see the pillars of water, whatever that means from a mystical perspective, don't assume and don't shout water, water. Don't assume you understand what you see. Don't assume you comprehend. And Maimonides says the reason that Rabbi Akiva emerges successful or in peace is because he was comfortable to stand on the place of doubt. Okay, and when you're talking to someone or you're meeting an individual or when Chad is doing his exploration, you need to come in a place where we speak about this a lot, Luke, where you've retracted yourself. I'm not coming with all the answers. I'm just coming from a place where we're comfortable with the doubt. We're comfortable with insecurities. We're comfortable with the uncertainty of certain things. So I would agree also with Tayo that the potentiality is actually a great place to be, where you have this idea that is still not fully formed. And we get a little lost if we're too certain with our propositions that we know exactly what they mean. We have to always leave. And when we say in arguments for heaven's sake, it doesn't mean that I think you're right and I'm right. It means I am leaving some room to assume that I am wrong. And then that will allow me to then understand you in that sense, or leave room for me to try to really comprehend where you're coming from.
Yeah. Well, and so, well, I would say this. I was reading that Jensen essay that I shared with you, Hezi, and I was thinking a lot. After reading that, and I read it before, and here's the thing I was thinking about this, oddly in connection with this Kale Zeldin tweet, right? So it's like, okay, so our frames are our worlds. Well, the Torah is something I think that is given to actually allow you to live beyond those frames, which are the worlds that we create, into the world that God intends. Right? So that's like its purpose. And then I think as Christians, what we believe essentially is that Jesus is that made flesh. Like, he is that potentiality made flesh. What frame does Jesus live in? What world does he live into? Oh, you're muted, Hezi.
I would say let's assume that's true. Forget the difference whether you think that Jesus embodies the full Torah. That's fine. My point would still be, even in that case, that Jesus is the whole Torah, it would still be the way you interpret that Torah is not assuming you have the answer, right? It's not yelling water, water. It's going into these levels of interpretation of Jesus himself and understanding what Jesus means, or what the filioque means, or what the Eucharist means. All these things, you should come into them with understanding that there's multiple levels of understanding, and not to run in and assume that your interpretation is the correct one.
Right. Well, Hezi, okay, it's more than that. So, like, if you think about, like, okay, so the ultimately the mystery of Christ is Christ in you. Like, that's what I believe as a Christian. That is the ultimate mystery of Christ is Christ in you. So when I was at my wife during her worship service, and I was observing, like, everyone, like, reaching out with their little prayer books and touching the Torah scroll. That is like in that ritual, that is a reflection of the same mystery that I am talking about when I talk about Christ in me. Because that potential of incarnating Torah it exists in you too. What Jesus is just like the forerunner. Like, he anticipates our individual embodiment, our individual potential to embody Torah, and our future general resurrection through his own resurrection. That's what's going on. I don't, make of it what you will, but that's the thought I had. I was in the synagogue with my wife as the services were going on.
To be continued in our
Yeah. We should save that for later. Yeah.
I don't want to derail the conversation. We'll talk, guys.
Yeah.
Take care.
No, I think that's good. I mean, that's like where this is. I don't know. Often I don't know how. Like, I see comments from Phlebas and different people, or Tayo, that I piss off, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do to make you happy.
But here's the thing, Luke. It's like, so this actually points to why you're standing on this ground of, like, why, because, like, you can't coerce someone into that.
Yeah.
and the way that you are going to come into that potential is unique to you.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. But it's also, this is why I love the Rob Bell quote that I love is like, God is he about whom we must never speak, but we must always keep speaking, as is everything. So like, this is what I mean with like the ideological tribalism thing. We need to be able to keep talking about ideas, but without falling into these traps of like the hidden desire. Like, we need to bring these hidden desires into self-awareness so that we can repent of them and grow of them. Because ideological possession, I would say, is fundamentally a delusion.
Well, you know what it is at its core, I think, is like it's a desire to make the other like you.
Yeah.
As opposed to allowing the other to be who they are.
I love you, T. Grog. T. Grogan, I want to just publicly challenge you to have multiple long-form conversations with people instead of just throwing text-based stones.
What it's saying.
I don't know. He just
says avoiding contradictions. You can't avoid contradictions. Everything is, you're going to have to, like,
it's Rollins' big point.
It's all paradox in the ground. The fact that there is something if you try to explain the fact that the universe exists, you're going to run into a paradox. Everything ends in paradox if you chase it to its end.
Flip, this does have to trigger you, Luke.
Well, it's funny. Like, I talk to my wife about this all the time. Like, I don't have very much anxiety about. It's funny how this works. Like, I've been learning about this stuff through Myers-Briggs and personality stuff. And
Jim.
Huh? What's up?
Dr. Jim. Dr. Jim.
Nice stash, by the way, buddy. You're just picking up where I left off. That's good.
I know. I miss your stash, Luke.
You're muted somehow. I can unmute you, I think. No, I can't. You're muted yourself. So, I don't.
Hey, am I live?
You're good. Yep.
Hey, excellent. Hi, guys.
Hey.
I couldn't resist. Julian showed up, so I had to show up.
Yeah. Well,
Great
do you
stuff.
have? What do you here to hang, or you have thought? What brought you in?
Well, I'm with Tayo on one of these. I think I'm with Tayo on one of his points he made earlier, and.
He froze.
No, that's enough. He's with Tayo. That's end it there.
I'm with Tayo too.
I'm with Tayo. I'm with Andrew. And here's the point I wanted to make, and that is that we, Luke, relational ontology. Ultimately, the deepest relation for me is the relation of dependence, and we all have to see ourselves both as dependent and with people who are potentially dependent on us in their relation to us. So as we speak, as we interact, we're influencing people. I think that was one of the things that Tayo was trying to say. And it could very well be the case that there are moments where dogmatic propositions are the right thing, because the person you're with, needs that, or that's what your relation to them and your recognition that they are dependent on you in some way is requiring.
Yeah, so that's a good word to illustrate that. One of my children, my youngest, is like, there are no solutions or no trade-offs. Or Clem Snide, our boy Clem Snide said, to be blessed is to be cursed as well. And I know you like Clem Snide. So my youngest is very much a rule follower and a perfectionist, just like follow the rules. And very often she will come to me and ask me questions about like, what should I do here? Or what, whatever. And you guys know me. And so like, I'll spout off some Lukean ridiculous nonsense. And she's like, so what should I do? And I'm just like, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do the thing that I'm always trying to do with people, which is like practice your own discernment, practice your own integrity. Like, I don't want to tell you what to do. Like, I can't tell you what to do. But she's like, what do I do?
I mean, I think that, like, that's the hard part, is like almost coming to the place where you're like, okay, this is the bridge that gets people across the water. They have to have they have to have a view to see. And like, I mean, that's the hard part. Like, I mean, that's the hard part with like a drug addict, is they have to have the drugs to protect them from the thing that is hurting them so much. And it's like, this gets them across to like numb the pain, but now it's become this thing that's destroying you. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's like, I mean, that's the hard part about being a parent, is like, okay, I have to give you a worldview, child, but it is going to I mean, the good thing about, I mean, we all hate it, but now I got teenagers, and now they're like, I mean, my kids are very respectful, but to the gist, they're like, whatever, Dad, F you, you don't have a clue. You know what I'm saying? It's getting to that point, and it's like, but that is good, because now they're cutting against the world I see, but now they have to create a view. But that's eventually going to lead them to stumbling, and then they're going to hook on to somebody who gives them a worldview and dogmatic, and it's the only way they're going to see it in their 20s, and then they're going to throw that back at me, and then I'm going to go, well, that's kind of stupid. Here's these contradictions you're showing. And I mean, that's like, here we go, T-Grog. Like, the thing T-Grog coming in here is like, man, I've gone down that whole scientific deconstruction. I've taken this apart and I've rebuilt it back up. And yes, I know it's lacking a lot of, biological and physicists. I know I don't have all that, but I've deconstructed a ton of what that Christianity was. And I built it back up to this point. And yes, you're coming in now poking at all this work I've done. But I'm now to the hysterical point where I'm like, that's fine, T-Grog. Like, poke away at it. Like, I welcome it now. Show me the holes, but I guarantee you I can patch up those holes. And that's the other point. Am I patching it up with ideological things? And that's where I'm like, maybe I'm missing something. But that's where we need the TLC to be like, well, is it missing?
We are, but that's... we're all like, I mean, unless we're saints, like, then we're just moving from one world that we've created to another world that we've created. And so, yeah, I don't know what to say beyond that. It's like,
but all I would say that don't we need the dialectic thing? Is it the dialectic?
Well, yeah, you need it, because that's where you see where your gaps are. That's how you see where your vision is askew. That's how you, like, that's where you have the potential to come. That's where you have a potential to see outside of your own frame into a new frame, if you allow your imagination to operate in the dialogue.
Well, I would just say this one thing, then. This is the key to Zizek and Lacan. Their point is that, in Hegel, that the dialectic leads you to this gap, this hole, this thing that it can't be reconciled. And this is my point, the TLC leads to, is you have to have faith to step beyond. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I think Zizek stops, Lacan stops. And that's where you have to have this ability to shift these views back and forth.
Faith is the only thing that actually allows you to operate beyond frames at all. Like, that's what it is. Because you're not going, because it's allowing you to operate into the world that is not seen. That is not the world of the given.
And AI ain't ever gonna have faith, because it doesn't know what it don't see.
It could, and it can't.
Right.
It can't possibly.
This is although
if AI were programmed by saints, couldn't it be given the world that they see?
But hang on. So this is my point then. Is faith not the coming to, we want to positivize everything, but faith is come to by the negative. It's always the collapsing and
right.
And the pain, the hurt that's on the cross.
Yeah.
The pain has come through the negative. And our ego always wants the positive.
Right,
we run from the negative.
because we have to allow, because precisely it, because that's okay. So love is sacrifice. Let's be very clear about that. Love is sacrifice, and so when I am acting in faith, like and love is the activity of faith. So that, and what I am doing in love is I am sacrificing my world that I have constructed so that I can make your world possible. Because I care as much about you as I do myself, or more perhaps than I do myself. And that is what allows me to act in love beyond the frames that normally bind us.
That's good. Yeah.
Can I make a point about a spiritual point about the ideological possession? I think the possession part is very important, because spiritually speaking, if you remove something, good or bad, that void is going to call something else to fill that void. There is the unclean spirit example that you exorcise one, and then if the place remains empty, 7 worst are going to fill up the space that has been vacuumed. And just to tide up the things, a coping mechanism is an attempt to fill that space, for instance, that a trauma or an addiction has created. So you have a coping mechanism to fill that void. And ideology are principalities. At least this is what I think. And by principality, I mean spiritual beings that have a higher order of influence compared to other, let's say, demons or unclean spirits that affect just a single person. You have things that affect wide nations, across nations. So those are influence on mass of people. And when we have like a dialogical approach, pedagogical approach, and all kind of philosophical techniques that allow us to, first of all, to recognize when there is an ideology that is possessing a person to a certain degree, or even a nation. You can recognize that. You have a psychological and philosophical approach that will lead you, or contemplative approach that will lead you to get rid of that conviction that has become a master in someone's life. But then the problem is still there in modernity. What thing is going to take the place? What is going to refill that void that has been created when you get rid of the ideology? And my personal life, yes, from teenager to young adult, I realized that without being aware, I was holding some ideas that they had nothing to do with my life or with in any level, but were there present, and they were not really coming from the context of your family, your school, but are bigger idea that are in you. Then I grow up, you see that, you get rid of that. But in my case, it was Christ that felt that void. I don't know if we do in this space a lot of awareness exercise, and we get good at dialogos, even to the point that PVK called Peterson an unauthorized exorcist. But once that spirits are evacuated, what is going to fill the space?
So I was gone for some of that. What's the main question? What's going to heal this space from being from having our? Because what do you say that Jordan? He's an unauthorized exorcist, and he's exercising what exactly? Ideological possession.
That's I think what PVK implied, that he's getting rid of some wokeism, maybe getting rid of some.
But you think he's also? I mean, here's the thing, and this is maybe, and I like a lot of what Peterson does, but sometimes I think he's also creating his own ideological capture of his own variety. I mean, and I think, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think he's caught up. I think he's caught up in Object A stuff.
He's caught up, very much caught up. He's very caught up in his identity as a culture war figure, and a lot of that is like completely understandable. From like, if I had been through what he had been through, would I be behaving any differently than him? Probably not.
Well, not what our good buddy Kelly or Rivet says. Is if you had every constraint on yourself that someone else has, you would be them, and you would be doing the exact same thing.
But what do you think about that? All ideologies are principalities. Some are worse than others, of course.
Yeah, that's true.
But they are all principalities. What do you think?
No, I think that's right. I think, and actually, Tomberg actually like draws the distinction between like, you know, principalities that are associated with like the hierarchies of evil and egregores. And actually, from Tomberg's point of view, like the egregores that are actually generated by us are actually worse because they're not bound by the covenants that limit the actions of the principalities of evil. So they or the concords, so they can do worse things. So yeah.
Well, I think that's spot on, the ideology, but I think that also the point is like, this is what, like, I think the subject is this thing we can't reconcile. It is this thing that is this black hole of desire that we can't map. Like, I think that's the other part. Like, AI can't map this. I think all of the principalities and powers are trying to map this and control it, but it's just whatever way it goes the opposite way and causes problems. But that's just throwing it out there. I would also say something about Jordan Peterson, that when you do see Jordan Peterson have, when we're talking about jouissance, when he gets going on a rant, that is jouissance, this pleasure in pain, when he is kicking back against woke liberals and all that stuff. Like, you see, that is jouissance to its fullest of what Lacan calls jouissance. And I'm not hating. I mean, we all do.
I thought jouissance had a connotation of association with like orgasm. It's like enjoy, like our word enjoyment, but there's like a sexual connotation that our word enjoyment doesn't have.
Yes, and there can be all that negative stuff, which is what Rollins is talking about, which is what I think. I mean, sex has that. That's why Rollins talks about sex so much. Is like what's really going on in sex and sexual enjoyment. Which teaser, Nate and I might talk about that sometime.
Yeah, I actually think, believe it or not, I actually think it's like, it actually can enter into this conversation. Because,
for sure.
Because, well, let's see here. Like, we can see how our sexual desire can be oriented in such a way that it just desires the other as an object. Right, and it wants to. We want to join with it. We want to join with it simply for the sake of our own pleasure.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's what the kind of proselytizing and evangelizing that Luke is talking about in a negative sense is like that kind of sexual drive. Like it shares a character with it. It's like, I want to make you just like me. And it's not acceptable if you aren't just like me. So I'm going to transform you into my own, into the image of what I want you to be, and I'm going to possess you for myself. But that's not a but sexual desire can be directed in ways other than that. Like, it can actually be oriented toward bringing two worlds together.
and sacrifice.
And appointing the participants toward a higher world that is above either of the world that they're currently inhabiting. And it's done through love, which is sacrifice. So it's where Eros and Agape meet.
And we want everyone on here to know that all of these 5 gentlemen are very good at the sex. Let's make that clear. And Phoebus, if you say anything about this, I will find you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Luke, God bless you.
I don't know how this works, but McMo is very sharp, so I'm sure that has to be true somehow.
Oh man.
No, but the sex thing is such a, because like, what are you? This is where that Rollins video, what he's talking. If you really, self-awareness is such a bitch because you're not aware of what you're not aware of, and so like, but when you're engaging in any pursuit of any desire, what's really going on there? Like, are you objectifying the sexual partner, or are you wanting something Rollins will always talk about, or do you want a lot of what he talks about? Because he made this movie called Making Love, which he's trying to talk about what love is, and talks about chaperones, and the purpose of a chaperone is actually to keep the people separate. What you're actually doing is increasing love. You're increasing desire by keeping them apart. Will I get no satisfaction?
Well, that's why I'm resistant to this idea that the telos of sexual behavior is procreation, and that's the full story, because that's just that is so functional, so pragmatic, so ultimately robotic and inhuman at the end of the day. Like, no one has ever engaged in sexual activity with that in mind as their purpose. Exclusively. Well, maybe they have. In which case I don't even want to think about what that was like. If that was really the only reason it was engaged in. Well, we have to have sex now because we have to make a baby. That's the telos of this.
That's like when people are having infertility issues, right? And they're doing, a lot of times they're just like, we got to do it. It's on the schedule. Once we got to keep having sex. And they often talk about it's not a good time.
Right. Well, that's the thing is even the kind of thing I was just talking about. Let's be honest. Let's be very honest here. Even in a loving relationship, not every single sexual act is always oriented toward that thing that I was talking about. Sometimes sometimes I mean that's just it's not because we're human and we're imperfect and we're sinful. And we're not 100% of the time going to be doing it in the right orientation.
So we are saying that basically ideologies, they are having an orgasm every time we spread them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, I got a question about this sex stuff. Well, you know how when Peterson was
Chad,
talking
I'll
about,
explain it to you later, okay?
will you draw me a picture? I only like pictures. You know how when Peterson talked about how we talked about dominance, hierarchies, and dominance, and how that language was influenced by Marxist whatever, and that's how, and then that language started to actually shape how the frame of how we would approach that lens, that scientific lens. Okay, so my question is, when Freud came out and he talked about pleasure, or all of man's problems can be rooted to pleasure or sex, did that in fact eventually come to shape the world that we live in and how we think about people's motivations in general? Not just that, but just not only did it shape how we think about things, but did it kind of infect our whole, let's say, all 4 P's of knowing?
That was like,
That was interesting.
I think it did. I think the other side of this is there's 4 P's of knowing, but what about like the unconscious to those 4 P's of knowing that Freud brings up, and how does that affect the 4 P's of knowing?
Well, participation, flow state, ecstasy all point toward precisely what I was talking about, is that when we get it right, that's when, I mean, that's not every sexual act achieves that state, but that's what it's oriented toward. That's what its actual true higher telos is. That's what its actual telos is. It is a foretaste of union with God.
All right. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about.
Well, that's kind of, I mean, this is, Chad, I think that this is actually really connected to Sam Tiedemann and Paul Antleitner, that last conversation they had, and the continuing series that Sam is doing in terms of evolution and like the telotic orientation to the Whitestone name. Shout out Whitestone name, like and subscribe, send money.
I heard they
navigating pattern.
I heard they have Ford Focuses over there for like $8,000. The Whitestone brand.
They do.
Car,
Free sushi.
car dealership.
Free
I'll shut
sushi is
up.
the favorite part of buying any car. Clearly.
Oh yeah.
Only a genius would put those two together.
Free sushi?
You don't even know what's going on.
I have no idea.
Well, you never watch my channel, Nate.
I do too, Chad. Not all the time, but I do watch it. I've made comments. I've been in your comments.
Don't you know who Tom Lukeson is?
I do know who. Yeah, I do, but I haven't heard that particular remark. Yes, I do know Tom Lukeson though.
Well, now that
now Tom Lukeson officially has the best mustache because Luke shaved his.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I should get back and do some damn work. There's two. Speaking of sex, there's two grown ass men in a small ass bathroom trying to remodel. You know, like that's uncomfortable. Not
Remodel?
that they're sex, but
They're trying to remodel?
Yeah, right. You know, talk about demolition.
Grabbing each other's tools, getting in the way.
I got to do some grouting here pretty soon. I'm sorry, I'm stupid. I apologize to everybody for ruining the stream.
No, actually, Chad, that thing that you said when you talked about like when you started talking about the 4 ways of knowing, like you were getting on to a very important spiral staircase that leads upwards.
Well,
in my opinion,
earlier in the comments, that bit I was saying about the 4 P's, the way that we often approach the other is we only assume our own 4 P's and disregard the other. So we're not like so we could talk about our propositions, or typically we're talking about their propositions, but we're not talking about their perspective, and we're not talking about their procedure, and we're not talking about their participation. Sometimes we are, but mostly we're focusing on their propositions and how they're not matching with ours. So like this is the whole models versus story and modes versus whatever. Like, so modes is a big piece of this, is if you have a shitty mode and you don't know how to, like you have, here we try to practice a mode of otherness. So rather than self-centeredness, because we're probably all pretty self-centered, except maybe Tunji and maybe Matt C. Maybe we have yet to talk, but so this idea of like, that's the opponent processing. So when you talk about opponent processing or optimal grip, like talk about them in conjunction with the 4 P's. That's what they are, right? This is, yeah. All right, I gotta get the hell out of here. Bye, guys.
Use that optimal grip, Chad.
Can I reinforce Chad's point a little bit? I think I'm gonna try in a very bad way to augment it. My sense of Vervaeke's 4 P's is that he's talking about how everyone, all adults, operate in the world. He's contrasting that with what the modern reductionist view of just interpreting facts as the only ways of understanding something. So he's saying nobody actually lives in that world. Doesn't matter what denomination you are. This isn't about sense making to figure out which church you're going to go to. This is about just living and operating in reality. So everybody has that P hierarchy stack. And sometimes he says, Vervaeke says that when it's properly understood, the propositional sits on top. Once you build that stack correctly. So he's also not denigrating the propositional. He's just allowing there to be this 4-dimensional view of talking about of knowing instead of the unidimensional. And it's cool if we use different P's and we add personal or something else, but like I think we have to distinguish. We have to say we're no longer using Vervaeke's P's anymore. We're trying to find a way to figure out which church to go to, which was not. It is not his intention with that. That's not cognitive science anymore. So I don't know. That's my truth bomb. I think he was. I think Chad was getting at that, and maybe because I'm more selfish, I wanted to make that point a little sharper and pointier. And like I gotta go. I just wanted to jump in and throw that in.
Oh, you can't drop that and then duck out, Matt.
Okay,
No. Okay, so I want to push back on the propositional being at the top. When I was tracking with you 100% with everything you said until you said that piece about the propositional being on the top, because the propositional is that's the layer where I can guarantee you everybody is wrong.
Yeah.
Everybody is wrong, and here's why. Because the propositional is our layer of explanation of everything else.
Yeah.
That's how we explain all the other ways we know. That's how we talk about what we know to other people, is through that layer. So on the one hand, it's at the top because it's necessary for communication, right? Because you can't really have direct access to my perspective. You can't have direct access. Well, procedure, I suppose, can be shared to a certain extent, but participation and perspective, you have no access. The only way for me to talk about how I participate or what my perspective is to give it to you with propositions. But here's the thing, because particularly participation connects directly to the ground, right? Directly to the ground of our being, we can't ever adequately capture it in our propositions. So everybody's propositions about that are going to be wrong. Now, some may have more use than others. Some may which ties back to dogmas, right? So really what dogma originally means is Greek is something like signpost. And so some signposts are better than other signposts. Some signposts might actually end up making you get quite lost. So we can, in fact, but ultimately, nobody's signposts are actually the thing itself.
Yeah. Does that? I don't think you're not departing in any way from Vervaeke in that respect.
I know I'm not. That's why I just wanted to talk about like the way in which. Yeah. The way in which it's on top of the stack is not highest in the hierarchy of knowledge. And what Chad said, what made me interested in what Chad was saying is when he transitioned from us talking about like human sexuality directly into Vervaeke's 4 Ps. Well, it's like, this is okay. Whatever the Bible uses knowing as a way of talking about sexual relationship, right? And like the way we know God is through love. Like that's how God knows us, and that's how we know God is through love, which is sacrifice, which is the deepest level of participation. So that's why I thought that was interesting, because that through sexuality and referencing Vervaeke's 4 Ps, then we can talk about how that connects to knowing. I lost everyone.
The only thing I would say is that in this prepositional stack, like we have this stack down, and then you got all these layers, coming back up. My only point is, and again, this is my hysterical keep questioning, is that, and what I've studied through Lacan, is that we are always retrofitting back that understanding and then pushing it forward. And in the unconscious, we're tricking ourselves. We're constantly playing this trick on ourselves. And so do we ever get at these 4 P's of knowing? And I think maybe in what you're saying, Nate, we do in this love where we refuse to do this, but it all culminates in like coming together with the other, like making this way and not, but again, Lacan would always say that we're always at temptation to our ego to connect with this other and do this weird flip where we are trying to take whatever they're doing because we're like, oh, they're the smart one, and then we create this whole thing where it's like it's our idea, and then we
that's Girard's idea of mimetic. That connects directly to Girard's idea of mimetic rivalry, where it's like that's precisely what's going on.
But then we don't understand ourselves truly. That's what I'm saying. Is we constantly are tricking ourselves. Okay. So.
Yeah. No.
But I don't know how to connect that with Vervaeke. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I think I'm agreeing with both of you guys. Sorry, I had to jump away for a second. I think all I'm trying to add, the only spice I'm trying to add to this, by agreeing with Vervaeke, and so I'm also agreeing with Nate, as I usually do, is that if there is a past, if there's a shadow self of us coming from a different background where we had a different ideological identity, and we felt that identity was based on propositional truth primarily, then we never knew that identity we were in. And that's not necessarily the fault of that identity. That might be our sense-making perceptions. We're not like we were living, the other P's were living in a different world. I wouldn't necessarily blame in a way it's still kind of assenting to this propositional truth sense-making thing, to say it's the proposition's fault that I was just looking at propositions instead of saying maybe I didn't understand it on the other levels.
Right. The propositions that you were holding were a result of the way that you were seeing the world, which was a result of all these other layers of knowing that you have.
That was where I would say.
Right. Well, and actually, so Matt, this is right, and this is precisely. Well, this is where this just shows what the importance of the idea of repentance or metanoia. That's because if that's how we get out of that. That's how we get out of that trap.
Yeah, it's not Andrew, just in churches.
Andrew, you're muted.
Sorry. I would just say that isn't that showing that our prepositions, and when we get stuck in that trap, is our consciousness is kind of stupid. It keeps tricking us to just attach to this ego thing that we're like, yep, this is just my way of seeing it and going. And that's the fact of the matter, where our algorithms and AI, it's just generating that on superpower. And now it's this thing is going to it just keeps feeding us back to us this stupid consciousness that we're like, what in the world's going on here?
Well, yeah, and that actually, I'm glad you brought it back to the ego thing, because the I that we are continually trying to remake others into the image of and relate to others in accordance with isn't really who we are.
Wow. It's who we want to be, who we want other people to perceive us as, something like that.
Well,
yeah, and I would say that.
Go ahead.
I would just say, yeah, exactly. We want our ego, so we keep projecting onto them. I mean, this is what in psychoanalysis, this is what we do to the analyst, is we project onto them. You're supposed to know, so we try to trick them in all the ways to play their game and get their prepositions, and then we can do it. But the psychoanalyst goes, "Oh, I know what you're doing. Your unconscious is tricking you," and I will do, like Lacan says, you have to listen with a third ear, and you have to be able to question that right then and go, you're playing the game. And in that one question causes them to go, oh, the whole world collapses. And constantly doing that, you get them to create a new world, a new way of seeing and going about it.
Right. And I think we have to, I mean, honestly, and like until I mean, that's what we have to do until we're actually able to live into the creation or the kingdom, the world to come, however you want to conceptualize it, until you're able to see that world, which only saints can do, then you need to you need continual repentance. You need continual metanoia. You need to continually be deconstructing those worlds and moving up into higher and better versions, which is also, by the way, another reason the propositions matter, because the propositions are signposts toward higher worlds we might inhabit.
Yeah, they help you understand the stack beneath it that hopefully builds up to that, and they point upwards.
If I don't have any propositions to like try to give you an illustration of the world I see, then how are you going to see it? But here's the thing. It's like, what's wrong is for me to try to coerce you. I just have to show you, I have to give you the signposts and point you in the direction, and you either see it or you don't see it. The minute I try to enforce my will and try to force you onto the path and shove those down your throat and demand that you accept them, then something's gone terribly wrong. And what I'm doing is satanic, and that's not spreading the gospel.
And that way you are like, you give the master then frees them. The master doesn't say, this is the road you're taking. The master then is giving you this free road that you have to walk, because the masters walk that road too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that is true freedom, right? This is what we're talking about, getting to freedom, this free place. But also the master can go, I see all those signposts back there. Now you can see all that I've gone through, and now you can like push you forward where I couldn't go before. I'm stopped here. This is as far as I can go, but you can take it further now.
Well, and what Jesus says, what? He says, I am the way. And then ultimately, the mystery of Christ is what? It's Christ in us. So how do we show others the way? We show it through what we do, how we are in the world, how we act toward them. Like the only face of, like, since the ascension, the only face of Christ that it's possible for anyone to see is the one that you are able to show to them through your behavior. And as much as your behavior fails to live up to that, then you need to be continually repent and continually undergo metanoia until you actually do get there, which only saints do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah.
Nate, I hope you can see, like, the only thing I was trying to do was add a little bit of color to the spectrum.
Oh yeah, no, I thought what you were saying was super useful.
Yeah,
super useful.
And for me to think about it, yeah.
And I just wanted to point it. I wanted to give you a signpost that pointed it in a different direction. Notice how I wasn't coercive and I wasn't combative about it. I'm just like, hey, look at this. What do you think about this? This is another way of looking at it. That's it. And I just trusted that if it was, here's the thing. I trusted that here's the thing. You have to trust that when you're speaking truth, that authority will be obvious and present itself. And the best way to be in contact with truth is to not think that belongs to you. That is something that does not belong to you, that you see and you're trying to participate in, and that you're pointing others toward.
Yeah, that you're not the only one participating in that currently, even. So
no.
You can find out how that participation gets.
Well, and also we can't get hung up on the language that we use to express it, because Matt, you were talking about how much I sounded like John Vervaeke, and it's like, yeah, I do sound like a lot like John Vervaeke, and it's like,
I'm trying to sound like him. That's why I'm trying.
And as far as I can tell, what Vervaeke sees and what I see is the same reality, but he talks about it in different language than I do. Mm-hmm. Do I need to insist that Vervaeke use the same language to talk about that reality that I do, or is it enough that that I can see that he sees the same reality, even though the words he uses to talk about are different words than the words I use?
Yeah, Yeah, well, that's why, like, when Luke will say something like he's got the 4 Ps and he's adding a 5th P, I think that's really interesting because now he's saying we're like maybe I can get at it with whole new language. If you add a 5th P, it's a whole new, it's
Is he talking about adding a 5th P?
Personalist on top of it.
Oh, that's the one I actually said that you needed. You oh my God! If you go back and look at the very first comments that I made in PVK's videos where he was talking about Vervaeke, that is precisely what I said was his missing P.
Okay, maybe Luke's just patterning you, or maybe you guys were both.
Or again, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same things and just using slightly different language to talk about. I don't know. We'll find out. I'm going to be talking to him.
I'm open to it.
I'm talking to him again later this month. So.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
I would just say that personalist is
welcome, Mark.
Like the end. I would just quick. Sorry, the personalist is the thing that I think psychoanalysts you're trying to get to the end of your own personalist. This you know yourself to be, and you've gone through all this work. Like in a way, like that is the hope.
Yeah.
Sherry needs to get in here and save us from all the dick jokes that are going on in the chat.
Did we help, Tayo? Did this help? Did we add some seasoning to this that helped kind of round things out? Oh, you're muted, by the way. But take that as a yes.
Oh no!
I'm gonna leave. I can't wait.
Yeah, I you were trying to get out of here a while ago, and I wouldn't let you.
See you guys.
No, he's left.
Yes. You wanted to talk to Matt?
Actually, no, I did because he asked the question. But I actually came back on mainly just to say, Nate, thank you for all of this channel. I was listening into the Saturday Poetry, and I'm just like, how is this free? How is all of this? Just, yeah, I'm grateful to God for you. And I know I come on Luke's stream and just give him a hard time, but that's probably only because I mostly agree with Nick, and he's just a little bit unlike me, so it triggers me more.
Sure.
But this channel is amazing. What you, Sherry, Luke, and everyone's doing it is truly a blessing to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mark,
what'd you want to say?
Hi, Kyle. Hi. Let's see. Do you want to talk about sex, or do you want to talk about faith?
Whatever you want to talk about.
Well, no, there was just a couple of those. I mean, it seems like we're at the end of this thing, so maybe let's let it go. I was just when you're talking about, restate what you said about Christ is that you have a view that Christ is all in all, and that I'm trying to understand I guess your universalism from a Christian point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have, like, in the context of TLC with our we have, say specifically, we have people like outside of the Christian faith who I wonder if in our universalism we aren't threatening to essentially erase their identity, if you understand what I'm asking.
Right.
That if you say Christ is it's the universal Christ, Richard Rohr.
No, Mark, that is such a. I'm glad you asked me that, because I'm actually getting ready to talk to Hezi this later this evening. Hezi and I are going to talk, and we're actually going to talk about we're talking about a Robert Jensen essay called "Toward a Christian Theology of Israel," and so that's kind of precisely what we're going to talk about. Is how does the church relate to Jewish identity, and what is the church to make of Jewish identity? And I'm kind of with Jensen in believing that Jewish identity is not obliterated by by the church age, that Israel the historical fact of the continuation of Judaism and an embodied fleshly Israel alongside the church during the church age is part of what God is doing. And I would say that once you step into that logic, you can kind of start seeing yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. I've been captured by Zionism. Yes, I am a Zionist. Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that you have this vision at the end of Revelation where all the nations are gathered within the kingdom. Sorry, my dog is barking because I think Amazon is delivering. But this vision of a multitude of nations are gathered into the new heaven and new earth, and it's not clear. I don't think the writer necessarily had a clear understanding of how that is realized, but it's a vision.
Right, because
he's just projecting what he sees or writing down what he sees, and it's like probably running through his head like a film script to us, right? Go ahead.
And I think that lack of clarity I think it's unclear for a reason. I think because there's a way in which that even though Christ has been revealed to us, the whole mystery of Christ in you, remains a mystery until it's not. Until it's not. And that is I think that is the parousia that we are still moving toward. That is the Messiah that Israel is still looking for. And I think there's a way in which, because Jesus already fulfilled the role of Messiah as an individual personage, that the parousia has a necessarily collective element to it, which is why we talk about Christ being all in all in the eschaton, because why we have that language of Christ being all in all, because it is not just like it's not the return of Christ just as Christ. It is the realization of the whole Christ through the dawning of Christ in you fully within all the nations. Including Israel, and at that point, then Israel and the church will be together as one.
Right. Well, what I'm thinking
the Eucharistic feast in Revelation is led by the 144,000 of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, can I simplify the language a bit and see if this makes sense to you? I'm almost tempted to say that we Christians are the junior partner in this enterprise.
Yep.
That in Paul's language, and Paul says, you are grafted into Israel by faith. Right. And be careful, because you can be cut off for lack of faith. He actually is very explicit about this. That the way you enter is also the way you can end up alienated from the work of God. And I think this really resonated with me recently when Hezi made the statement, God's promises are irrevocable, which is, and it's absolutely true, and the scripture supports that entirely. So he is not wrong. And so that being the case, I don't see how we Christians aren't the junior partner in this. And
right.
And then one more thought is what elevates Christians or Christ in the world is very much like Jesus's parable about when you're invited to a wedding banquet, take the lowest seat, sit at the kids' table, and wait for the host to recognize your merit and bring you forward and give you a higher place. And I wonder if, as Christians, we're so obsessed with, we think we're right, we've got the right view, we've got the right theology, we've got the map to salvation, when in fact that's not what we're called to do or be. We're called to take that low seat and wait and be Christ incarnate in the world, embodied, and then through our goodness and in faith, be elevated both by God and by the community around us into prominence.
And not only that, when we've gone wrong in a way where we've moved away from being embodied toward focusing too much on the transcendental aspect of divinity. And like, that's been precisely how we've gone wrong. Like, by becoming too abstract, too disembodied, too focused on the transcendental. And that's what I think that's like, and I think that like being in dialogue with our older sibling, or actually, Tomberg actually invokes the commandment to honor thy father and thy mother when he talks about how Christians should view Judaism. And like, yeah, like we need, like, they're a good reminder of that. I also, one of the other things I say is like, Jews need to keep reminding us, where's the kingdom? Because we need to be reminded that whatever this entire church age is in fact like a detour, and the eschaton has not arrived. And we're moving, and both Israels are moving toward that realization together in history, and have different roles to play.
Is there, in Paul's view, Apostle Paul's view, are there two Israels or one?
Right.
I see it as one.
It's one. It is one. Yeah.
But just for the sake of conversation, we'll say two.
No, I think that was probably a misstep on my part to express it that way.
Okay.
Well, here I just when you guys were talking, I thought, hi, Mark. I thought of this here. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. While the Pharisees were assembled, Jesus questioned them. What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? David's, they answered. Jesus said to them, how then does David in the Spirit call him Lord? For he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. So if David calls him Lord, how can he be David's son? No one was able to answer a word, and from that day no one dared question him any further. I don't know, that just popped in my head while you guys were talking, and then I read it and I'm like, what? For some reason I didn't remember that dialogue with the Pharisees. But I think it kind of ties in nicely to what you were just saying about whether Israel is two or one, right?
That's not okay. I'm going to want to address this from Abby. I just cringe so much to someday they'll believe in Jesus or Jesus is their Messiah, because I don't know, maybe like a Muslim saying that Jesus is really only a prophet. But that's not like, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that the only way to understand what Jesus is through the foundation that is established in Jewish thought. There's no way of understanding what Jesus claims to be without the foundation laid within Jewish thought. So that's not what I'm saying at all. And I'm also not saying I'm also not saying that Jews need to accept Jesus as the Messiah in order to be saved. I'm saying that I'm saying that salvation remains of the Jews, and I'm also saying that the messianic expectation that Judaism is expecting has not yet been fulfilled. Like, the kingdom's not here. Jesus announced the coming of the kingdom, but the kingdom is not yet here.
But
I'm wondering. Oh, sorry, Sherry.
Well, then what does the kingdom of God is within you mean then, Nate?
What was that?
What does the kingdom of God is within you mean then?
Well, because for the same reason that Christ's parousia is an event that has not yet happened, and is eschatological, and it's also something that every saint lives into already.
I see a very parallel thought there in Judaism, in that there's the idea that no man will have to be taught anymore, right? Like the kingdom of God is within you, and no man, when the Messiah comes, no man will need to be taught, right? And also Paul's, you will know as you are known. Mm-hmm. Those three things for me always come together in my mind anyway. I'm not saying I'm right, but.
Well, no, yeah, because there's a way in which, like, when the kingdom has come in its fullness, then everything will be like it was on the Mount of the Transfiguration, where knowing and seeing are one act. Like right. the apostles knew that it was Moses and Elijah, but so, like, if they were seeing only with the eyes, then they would have had to say, "Hey, Jesus, who are these two guys you were talking to?" But they knew immediately on seeing that it was Moses and Elijah. The knowing and the seeing were one. Well, in this world, knowing and seeing are not one.
Can I ask a question? The problem I have with stepping back just a bit, like I said, with if what I'm saying is correct, that we are the junior partner in this, and yet at the same time we have this. There's no question the Apostle Paul saw Christ as a more profound, the ultimate fulfillment of the law, of all revelation, right? I mean, he elevates it. He clearly elevates Christ above Moses. All right, let's just put it like that. But then he says at the same time, we are grafted into Israel by faith. So the question is how do we have relationship with one another without nullifying one or the other? Yeah, we're kind of in this yin yang dance, right? But and maybe there's no squaring that circle except in eternity. I don't know, but I see. I never want to go to someone like it's really tricky. Think about it. You say, okay, here, if we radiate Christ so brilliantly, someone like Hezi comes along and says, I'm ready to join. But the problem is everything, if he sees, hold on a second, everything he's been taught heretofore says joining will nullify your standing in Israel or within your community.
Yeah.
I don't want either. I mean, I was like, here I am. I'm Sam the evangelist. I'm going to baptize this person. What am I feel almost like I'm betraying God either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's right. And so here's the thing: it's like this is one of the things that we get really confused about. Like, I think even as Christians is like for example, it's like, you know, my mom like sent me a really sweet message on my birthday, and I said, "Hey, Mom, I love you. You're the best." And she's like, "No, I'm not the best. Christ is." And it's like, we can't, like, as long as we see our identity in Christ and our love of Christ is in competition with other identities and other loves, we're getting something wrong. So what needs to happen, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I can actually kind of see the outlines of it happening right now. It's like we have to get to the point where it's like identity in Christ is not seen as being in competition with Jewish identity.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Nate.
And I don't think it is.
Well,
I don't think it is. I really don't believe that it is. And I think when St. Paul says that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, he's not talking about obliterating those identities. What he's suggesting is that in Christ, those identities don't matter, because being in Christ is to be in unity. Mm-hmm. Because Christ is the consciousness that connects us to the God who is love, who is sacrifice, who makes it so that my eye is not in competition with your eye, but we participate in the great I am.
So okay, but then flip it around. How do I maintain my identity in Christ, say within Hezzy's Noahide vision? Is that necessary? It seems to me that these things.
Yeah, so the Noahide, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. There's some tension for me for the Noahide thing because it's like, you know, it's like, hey, there's already a pathway for Gentiles. It's like, and there's something about the Noahide thing is like kind of like, it doesn't seem very Jewish. It seems like it's a historical development that seems to be in a response to Christianity, and I understand the reasons for it. And in a lot of ways, it's like karmically warranted, and I totally get it. And I was like, I totally get it. It's karmically warranted, but I hope that I would really hope that we would stop trying to proselytize each other.
What if we're not even trying? What if we're not even trying? We're not even trying. We're not, but people are still attracted. Like, look at how people just wander into the TLC. It's not nobody's out there saying, "Come to the TLC." I mean, very few, anyways.
Right,
they just wander in.
Yeah, just show a more beautiful vision. Yeah, I'm in favor of that kind of. But I do draw a distinction between spreading the gospel or evangelizing and proselytizing. I think they're actually slightly different.
Yeah.
So,
but it creates a lot of tension. And think about the families outside of the TLC. So someone comes in. I can imagine some people coming from, say, very fundamentalist families, coming into the TLC with all of our wacky views and Jordan Peterson and everything else. And I can imagine that creating if they really take some of this to heart, then take it back home. I can see some pretty rough things.
Oh, for sure. Oh, I don't have to go very far. It's like there's some my mom follows the channel to a certain extent, and I love my mom, but there's a certain extent like she doesn't understand everything I do. She thinks estuary is a terrible idea. She thinks it's a terrible idea. So.
Well, I don't understand your whole tarot thing at all. So one of these days I'll have to try to figure it out.
Hezzy, I believe that I am misunderstanding and that you are not trying to proselytize. I actually believe that. I've actually, as I'm making I think I make the critique as more of an invitation to talk about it. So, I'm sure that that's right.
I have to understand that too, Kezzy, to be honest. Like, I'm not accusing you of proselytizing, but I want to understand where that nuance, where that little line is between what you're doing and what proselytizing is doing.
Well, Hezzy is absolutely brilliant. I love it.
Oh yes, he is. And one of the things that I find always annoying is, and they're like little hooks in me whenever I hear them, is things like little sibling or little brother or little sister or join or things like words like that, because this is what I think Jesus is saying here when he says, "How then does David in the Spirit call him Lord? For he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand." If you understand the vision that Maximus has about the whole mystery of Christ, there isn't this greater than, lesser than, there's just it. I don't want to use the word equality because it's so bastardized today, but we are one.
Yes. Well, and Sherry, okay, the whole idea of encountering God face to face, it's automatically implies equality. Like that, if you understand what it means to interact with someone face to face in the ancient world, then you know that idea of coming face to face implies equality.
Well, here, let me
because you don't come face to face with someone who's not a peer.
Let me read something that I wrote recently. Again, the theme of face to face,
which is, by the way, the theme of our conference in September.
I know. George MacDonald says in his Fantastic Imagination essay that a fairy tale is just a fairy tale as a face is just a face. He also says, So long as I think my dog can bark, I will not sit up to bark for him. This last one, he says in defense of not giving you anything of the meaning from his story. He goes on to say, if it means nothing to you, then put it aside. I have thought long and hard about the face. God's face, my face, which I never see save for a reflection, and the face of the other. If I take Harding seriously, they are all the same face. If I take George seriously, I will never know anything but subjective meaning. I think they are both right. It is in the face of the other that I see myself and come to know myself. And the same is true for them. And for all of us, we are staring at the image of God. And image is how we see and speak. We are created out of and into the imagination of God. Images people are subconscious. And from there we derive our language. And in speech we convey those very subconscious images to our friend. And when he receives them truly, he has entered our consciousness, and we have become one in God's imagination. I'm not sure what I'm trying to convey. I'm simply sharing connections that pop into my head as I read. I can say definitively, though, that we are clueless about what it means to be face to face. MacDonald would then add, as you call it. One of my favorite reoccurring phrases of his. He is gentle and loving and kind in telling us that we can only name what we think we see. Perhaps one day we will know as we are known. So this is the kind of, like when you said face to face is equality.
I want to known as we are. I want to thinking about what you just said about what we were about known as we are known. Mm-hmm. That is, again, think about what I was saying earlier about like the connection between sexuality and knowing, and how there's a way in which this is knowing in a deep sense, and that is where I would point you at to in understanding the consummation of the bride.
Thank you for sharing that, Terry. I'm much less certain than you are, Nate, on this whole equality with God thing. If there is equality with God to be had for us, it is through Christ, but not through Christ as particles, as individuals, but only through our complete, full integration into Christ, where I am no more, but it is He who lives in me. And so, but
absolutely,
this is also through.
You can't. No ego. No ego can be in Christ at all, because that's not the kind of. Because the ego is not. The ego is not. The ego is not the kind of self which can be united to Christ.
But there's another thing, back to the whole sex thing. When everybody's talking about that. Go ahead, Sherry.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I just wonder, because
there's another little pet peeve. When people talk about the ego, and they're bashing the ego. But I mean, without the ego, we just die. We shrivel up and die. Mm-hmm. Like the ego has to just grow up. Like the ego. That's the whole process of what being human is a
recognition of I am that. Yeah
and also like my sister was saying yesterday, she said now I'm starting to understand now why, because she lives with First Nations people, why the elders are so quiet. They're just quiet. They listen to all the whirlwind of dialogue, they listen to the storm of drama, and they see nothing. Because they know that there has to be this deconstruction of the ego, right? It's not destroyed. The deconstruction. Well, it's actually not even a deconstruction. It's a construction of the ego, because it comes out very juvenile, very immature, and very me and I centered, and then it has to go through this process where you can very easily just watch somebody making all the wrong decisions and know that they're going to be okay in the end. Like there's something about that, right? And I think that the elders know.
Well, but that's like the thing. It's like it's Tomberg has that line about how like the ultimate. So obviously Barfield has this thing about like imagination being a truth-bearing property, which he gets through Coleridge, and MacDonald is obviously big on this idea too. But I think Tomberg is really good in drawing it to a very fine point. And that what the reason this is so is that the imagination is the property through which I can become the other. And I begin to see that extension of who I am that is beyond the character that I play in my head that we call the ego. So it's and here's the thing. We have to see that like that thing is not in competition, but connected to everything else.
Well, like Harding does such a great job of like scientifically and physically illustrating the fact that we do not see our head unless we have a mirror or a camera or whatever, right? We can't, it's the only part of our body that we point at it and we don't see it, right? We only see our finger. We don't see the thing we're pointing at, but everything else we point at, we see the thing we're pointing at. And so, in his massive tome that I'm going through at the moment, he's making this very, snail-like crawl towards this idea that we only know who we are in the face of the other. We're only reflected in the face of the other. And it's how we come to know as we are known, right? It's in that relationship. And that because we're headless, he would say, we're actually from here up, we're in heaven. It's infinity. It's eternal, however you want to put it, right? And George MacDonald would call that the imagination, because within the imagination, there's nothing that we can't do. Like, it's limitless. It has no boundaries, right? But MacDonald would also warn against fancy, which I think is just that very juvenile version of the ego, right? Where we fancy things and we make up, silly things
into what we want rather than seeing what it is. So it's actually an inversion of imagination. Exactly. Imagination is the property by which we see a thing as it is.
Yes.
By beholding it and allowing it to present itself, whereas fancy is how the way in which we create things in accordance with our whims, as we want them to be.
Our graspiness.
Yeah. So fancy is contaminated by desire in a way in which imagination proper is not.
Yeah, but fancy desire, let's say on this side of the equation, needs to grow up into imagination and eros, right? That's what it's growing up into, I think.
To a transformed
I don't want to
eros.
sound too dogmatic. I get really excited about these things, and then I think I sound like I.
Well, because eros needs to be like eros when it's in its like non-transformed form. It consumes the it consumes the object, but there's a way in which like God is agape, but also eros, because God is also the beauty that is the beauty in which all beautiful things participate. So God is also eros. And so eros needs to be transformed into the fire of the burning bush that burns but is not consumed. Right. And that's, I think, like I had this dream one time where it's like, where I had this musical refrain going through my head, and the lyrics that went with it were there's a burning heart at the heart of everything. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like, to me, that's connected to the mystery of Christ in you, which is connected to Maximus's idea of the logoi. Like that is what that burning fire of God.
Job's integrity.
It's in the heart of everything, and that's what God is trying to transform everything into. Is that burning heart?
Yeah.
Do you remember? I don't have the reference at hand, but the scene in the Gospels where disciples are high-fiving it because they're kicking devil's asses. You know, they're casting out demons, and they come back and they're feeling good. And Jesus says, "Don't rejoice that you have power over these things, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." That to me is real. That as a coming back to Christianity through Buddhism, where where very much identity is empty, and it's almost empirically true. You can never find there's no essence in ourselves, and yet somehow that verse has always bothered me as a Buddhist, because there's something in that Jesus is saying, "Oh no, I'm going to redeem even your sense of self." That that Jesus says, tells the Buddhist, "Hold my beer." You know, I mean, it's just stand back. Let me show you something.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yes. Right. And in fact, and this is kind of the difference between and that Buddhist path of negation. It will help you escape from like the closed circle, but it only offers escape. It doesn't offer transformation. Whereas this path that Christ offers, which Sherry was talking about through, I think Harding's lens is essentially a Christian understanding, because he's talking about making the opposite movement, which is the expansion of it, so that it embraces all things without negating itself, which is completely different. And that is the thing that not only allows you to escape from Maya, but to transform the world. So that it's true, its true reality is revealed, and that all eyes can see it.
Well, I never reached enlightenment, Buddhist enlightenment, so I can't say what the limits of it are. And I've met some very impressive, or one particularly very impressive Lama, but so I really can't. That's another person I would be.
No, I'm not saying. So here's the thing. I'm Mark. I do not mean for a second to suggest that only Christians live into that, but in as much as as people are living into that consciousness, it is like, for me, the proper name that belongs to that is Christ. Now, but I think that like the Bodhisattvas are clearly indicating a similar kind of movement, because they're not satisfied with escape, right?
Well, they certainly seem to be Christ adjacent at the very least.
Right, exactly.
But what I'm saying is I'm dropping the Buddhism thing to pick up on Jesus specifically because of that one verse almost. I mean, maybe that's not the whole of it, but that contains it, in the sense that he's going one step further. Okay, we've got nirvana. Now I'm going to go one step beyond nirvana. And I'm just, don't take any of this too literally or too hard, okay? I'm just saying, I'm just throwing out a parable.
No, I have the same sense of it. Okay. I agree with you.
There's a nirvana, and then Jesus is saying, we're going to go one more. Yeah. And I'm going to say, your name is written in heaven. But it's, and then the question is, though, I don't know if I can take that vision and universalize it in quite the same way you and Luke do, Nate. And say that's a game for everyone, but it's which then brings you back to the problem of what we began with us being in partnership with Israel, us being grafted into Israel through faith. I mean, I'm all questions, guys. So
yeah.
At which point, I've got
Me
a dog
too.
on the plate.
I hazard some answers, but believe me, I will completely own the tentativeness of everything that I say. I'm giving you the best answer that I can see right now.
Well, I always think if St. Thomas Aquinas could say that he had a mystical vision and then said, okay, burn everything I ever wrote. If he can say that, then who am I, right?
He wrote a lot.
Yeah. But we're
thank you guys so much for your time and your thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
I've got to go.
Okay. Good to talk to you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. So I stayed home from work today because I have a bit of a chest cold. That's why I'm wearing an ugly gray.
You're wearing your feelings.
I was like, but this conversation has made me feel good, and if not in body, at least in spirit. This has been an enriching conversation.
I only saw since I jumped in. Really, So I'm a lazy farmer. I rolled.
Well, you saved us from all the dick jokes that were going on earlier. Because we started talking, it was like a bunch. We were talking about, which ended up the conversation ended up turning towards sexuality, because Luke and I had a little bit of a private exchange yesterday, and he said we were going to talk about it soon, and I just kind of went ahead and started talking about it, and then there was a bunch of like really bad jokes, and immature laughter that proceeded after that. So we need.
What were you talking about? Phallic logo?
Well, even like Slack was saying something about Nate's all about that PP, because it was in context. I was talking about Vervaeke's peas.
Oh.
Yeah, and so there was a bunch of and there were a bunch of jokes like that in the comments, and then the conversation on the stream was also.
And then there's only one topic.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It kind of veered. They kind of veered that way for a little bit. Yeah.
Well, it's right at the center of their very being,
So
anatomically speaking.
Well, I think Luke at one point said I just want you to know that all 5 men on the stream right now are really good at sex. I was like, give me a break, Luke. So that I think the potential of that conversation got derailed. With the inability to take it seriously.
Yeah. So what was it that you wanted to say? Can you say it to me?
Oh, I said what I wanted to say. What I wanted to say is that I think the idea that the telos of human sexuality is procreation is just wrong. And that it has a higher orientation than that. I think that it is oriented toward a foretaste of divine union. And it also points toward the whole mystery of Christ.
Yeah, but divine union equals creation of life, right?
Sure.
Excuse me. That's what divine union, that's what comes from divine union, right? Is the creation of life.
The creation of life.
The whole act in its proper context is a reflection, not just the act. Like the act alone is it's kind of like.
But it doesn't necessarily have to. It doesn't necessarily have to result in procreation for it to be properly oriented.
Well, if you want to make that a rule, then
if you want to limit procreation, I mean, unless you want to live, and okay, if you want to limit creation to biological creation only, I think that's wrong. I think something is created always, but it's not necessarily always a biological creation.
Well. Yeah, but you could be creating chaos too,
Yes, absolutely. It has all kinds of all of the fears about its negative potentiality and all the boundaries we want to put around it. Those are also all warranted, I think.
Yeah.
Although I think we need to be I think we need to be willing to discuss what those boundaries should be, and to understand that some of the boundaries that we put around them are more products of our frames than they are anything that is a divine boundary.
Well, this is why I said in that thing that I read, this is why I said we are clueless. I can definitively say that we're clueless about what it means to be face to face. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because, and I mean, the most intimate the most intimate act of being face to face is sexual union, right?
Right, precisely. Yeah.
So I don't know if we can actually, like, I don't think we can talk about what that is, what it isn't, or what it is, because we don't even know what it means to love ourselves as our neighbor. Let's say that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as soon as we start saying, well, it's this and it's not that, then I think we've already made a mistake.
The minute we try to fit it into our frames, we've already begun to fail. Yeah, that's why I was talking about, one of the things I was talking about earlier that you also missed was I was talking about, it's like, so Kale Zeldin had this tweet about like frames and faith. And I'm like, to me, like, faith is actually a thing that points beyond frames. Like, if you look at what the Good Samaritan is doing in the parable of the Good Samaritan, he is acting completely beyond frames. What he's doing is contrary to the frames.
Who is this?
The Good Samaritan.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He's acting beyond frames.
Yeah.
And so
he's acting out of his image, his integrity.
Right.
That's what he's doing.
Well, yeah. Which is the divine image.
Yeah.
He's acting out of the divine image within him, which is beyond our created human frames. The worlds, it's beyond the worlds that we create, and it's a direct participation in the divine world that we are supposed to be moving toward.
Yeah. And
okay.
He's got this really great hermetic move where he just disappears into the woodwork afterwards, right? So he does this like over the top divine thing. He acts out God in the world, and then he just, nobody knows where he went, right? The Good Samaritan. He disappears. This is what Jesus did on the road.
Christ descends too.
Yeah.
But why does Christ descend?
Because he's the head, because he's in the heavens, because he's above, like.
He can't. If Christ doesn't ascend, without Christ's ascension, there is no possibility of the realization of the whole mystery of Christ.
Right.
Christ has to ascend to allow in order for the potential of Christ in you to be born. Christ has to ascend, because otherwise, you just keep looking at him and not actualizing the potential in you.
Yeah, it's also the headless way. Like, I think this is why this is also part of the reason why Harding is onto this. Like, it's the hierarchy of heaven and earth is the book. Okay. So, we are, as Christians, we understand ourselves to be the body of Christ, but we are headless. Right. And then Harding goes to the beautiful lengths that he goes to show us that we are actually headless, that we ourselves are headless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah.
And that we hold each other's faces.
Yeah, that's why I said in the thing I read that, when I think about the face, I think of God's face. I think of my face, which I can't see except for in a reflection. And I think of the face of the other. Those are the three faces that we can possibly know, right, as human beings. And Harding's basically saying they're all the same face. They're all the same face. Because if I realize myself in the other, that means they're realizing themselves in me.
That's right.
Okay. And then what are we looking at? We're looking at the image of God.
Right. And this is why I talked, one of the other things I said earlier before you came on was that ultimately, the ultimate so the reason, remember how M.L. Bach talks about the image of the Lamb slain in Revelation being like a New Testament version of the creation story?
Yeah.
And that's is right, because, yes, we allow worlds to come into being through love, but love and sacrifice are actually the same thing. Because I have to be willing to let go of my right to possess anything in order to allow you to come to be in me.
Well, then that's
why Harding talks about having to let go of the desire to grasp even one particle for oneself.
Right, and that's why this is so interesting when Jesus says, the first and greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second is love your neighbor as yourself.
As yourself.
All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. But then he asks them the question, what do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he? Mm-hmm. This is not a different conversation. This is still happening. And they say David's, and he says, but David says, how then does David in the spirit call him Lord? For he says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. So if David calls him Lord, how can he be his son? So, it's like, we just don't, I mean, just think about it. If you realize who you are in the face of the other, and if the other realizes who they are in your face, then you are them and they are you. Which means there's only one. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good note to end on, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, and this is like because it's only one, but here's the thing: it's a oneness that's not. This is why the Trinity, I guess, because it's a oneness that is not in competition with and does not obliterate the multiplicity.
Right.
Like the multiplicity is still
multiplicity in order to arrive at the one, right? In order to know God, you have to love your neighbor as yourself.
Right, and those two loves are the same love.
Yeah, it's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing. Yeah. Okay, let's end there. I need to get some rest because I'm feeling under the weather, and I got to talk to Hezi. I got to talk to Hezi later tonight, so I'll need a nap.
Oh, I wish I could too. I won't bug it. I won't butt in though.
What did Hezi say?
He said, where is it?
What about Moses?
He said, yes, Sherry, just like with...
We see with Moses.
What do you mean by that, Kezzy? I'm just really curious.
Yeah, jump on for just a second. We'll extend for a little bit if you can jump on and explain what you mean.
Like he saw his fellow man.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, this is just something that's still... It's still like circling around in my mind, and for very good reason, because it's very profound, this face-to-face thing, and one of the things that really made me pause about the whole thing was when I was going through Job with Jess, I came across this information that it was held by Judaism that the question that was being asked by Job, or in the book of Job, was the same question that Moses asked God when he said he wanted to see his face. Right? And I'm just like, wow. Because Job wants to see God's face too. He's like, I want to face to face with you, right?
Yeah.
But the underlying question to all of that is, why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? That's the reason they want to see God's face. Okay, that's the reason they want to face to face with him, because their whole worldview was very mechanistic in the sense that only the wicked suffer and the righteous prosper.
Right.
But God flipped it upside down, and they're like, "Well, what's going? Now I need to see in your eyes, right? Now I need to."
So I said something on Twitter the while back because I've been thinking about I've been reading Bulgakov's philosophy of economy, and he talks about Bulgakov talks a lot about life in that, and contrasting life to death. And so I said this thing that there's a way in which fatalism is a worship of death. And like Jesus says, I am the life. And what God is ultimately on the side of is life. And life is that which is born through love, which is the same thing as sacrifice when you understand when you understand it fully. And where am I going with this? Fatalism is I don't remember exactly what it was maybe that had that, why I framed it exactly in that way, that fatalism is a worship of death. But I think the reason I was framing it in that way is that life requires, like, for the God to create the world, there has to be this simsum, right? There has to be this withdrawal. And so there has to be, like, yeah, I don't know if I can articulate. I'm too foggy headed to articulate it right now. But like, I just have this strong sense that, I know what it is, because that withdrawal allows for the existence of something other than God exists, right? Like that's like that there becomes a creation. The creation comes into being as a result of that withdrawal, so that there is something other than God. And if our being is not ontologically grounded in freedom, in a real freedom, then we are denying life, because there's no life that you can, that there's no, if you are not free in an ontological sense. And I'm not talking about just like pursuing whatever the whims of your will are. And I'm not talking about empty choice, but if you are not like absolutely like free in an ontological sense, then you don't exist at all. And you're not even alive. You're not alive. You're dead.
Yeah, well, that's why Jesus.
And so fatalism buys into that. It's like basically nothing is alive in a fatalistic view of the world. So if you're demanding that some sort of absolute karmic law be served in the cosmos, you are actually worshiping death and not the living God. That's why Job is such a that is one of the reasons that Job is so powerful, and why it tries so hard to overcome that view of the cosmos.
Well, he makes that vertical move out of the closed world of the serpent. Job does, right?
Yeah.
And when he does that, he actually mediates for everybody else. He becomes the mediator between heaven and earth.
And that is your freedom.
Yeah.
That's what your freedom is for.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? What's so super interesting about this? Nothing changes. Okay?
Right.
Like, the whole system is still in place. They bring animals to sacrifice, right? Job prays for them. They ask for forgiveness. They bring their sacrifices. Job acts as a high priest. He prays for them, and on they go. But what's happening there is, to me anyway, it's a metanoia. Okay.
Which is something I was talking about earlier too.
Okay. It's when Job says, "But look, that dead stump actually has a little green shoot." Right? It's actually going to grow again. It's life after death. And so his mediation is because of his own evolution of consciousness, right? Where he realized, where he ascends, right, into the heavens, he goes up another level of the spiral, right? And because of that, he's able to then take others with him, right? But if everybody's just circling down here at this level and they never break out of that closed world of the serpent, one person needs to pop out of there, and they can take everyone else with them. So anyway, go ahead, Chad.
Hello.
Hi.
So okay, I got like some swirling stuff in my brain.
I'm sure.
So I was thinking about something that Nate was talking about in the beginning about um, the joining somehow. This maybe not exactly what you said, but there's like a joining between, let's say, Judaism or Noah or I'm sorry, Abraham, the Abrahamic father, like the father figure there, through, let's say, Judaism, and then let's say the Christians, which is the bride, right? And and consummation. And then I don't know why I don't know much about the Noahide thing, but I was wondering how that might be tied. Also, I was thinking about um, sacrifice in like the ancient sense, where you have like the blood, and then and thinking about that as it might relate, not merely symbolic, but something symbolic to uh, the the cycle that women have, and then when I know when I've talked to uh, Yosef about the separation that takes place there between the husband and the bride and the bridegroom over a period of time, not just when the blood stops, but like there's even still more of a period. Then they come together after that. And I was just wondering, like, these ideas. Obviously, I'm probably being a real crazy heretic, but like, when I think about the pattern of how the mind of God and how it plays out in this realm, the realm that we can see, it's always kind of frame breaking, and it's always like what we thought plus some, and also breaks what we thought and just collapses it in on itself into, and that's life itself, right? And it's like you can plan as well as you like, but it always kind of like you never can know the mind of God. And I was thinking about how I don't know what do you guys think about this idea of the father and the bride consummation as it relates to the age to come or something like this. Uh, but the father
That
meaning
feels like one of your collage videos, Chad.
yeah,
I'm like,
that's
maybe you should make that into a collage video and then put a
oh
question
my
mark
god,
at the end of it.
my brain. That's all every video I'm like, this is what I have to deal with because I don't know what any of this stuff means. I just see patterns and I see like the
Yeah.
general meaning.
Well,
you get a lot of insights though, Chad, from working through that
yeah,
process.
because of that. Like I like the fact that you brought in that the I can't remember what it's called. Is it mikvah? No. Where the woman and the husband in Judaism have to separate when she has her period.
Yes.
And,
Mikvah is a ritual bath.
But she also does that, right? Which is like a forerunner of Christian baptism, actually, which is a forerunner of the going down, the death, and the resurrection. So, but anyway, yeah, but I don't know what that means, Chad.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I'm thinking of like if the let's say the laws are made, I wonder if God is beyond the law or if God
I think
holds
he's
to the law.
unless if I do I understand you? Are you talking about when you're talking about the union? It sounds like the union you're talking about is between Father Abraham and Mother Church.
That's correct.
Okay, and I would say that yes, that I would say that the bride of Revelation is in fact a union of Father Abraham and Mother Church. How that it's going to come about, I have no idea, but I do have a sense. I do have a sense that things are getting interesting and we're moving closer to that direction. But at the same time, there are elements within the church that are definitely tugging against that, because I also see an all-time peak, like I actually see a reversion to like more anti-Semitism in the church than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Well, well, just think about like since science now we can know what happens when the seed fertilizes the egg. There's a type of destruction that happens there, and there's as well as a growth. So it's like I mean, and the other thing is I say all of this stuff in as much humility as possible, which is I don't have a lot, but what I'm trying to say is when I think about these things in the way I've just said, now it's not prescriptive, it's just like I wonder, God would be so like hilariously inventive and crazy in a way that is inarticulable. It's like so that's why I think that's what allows me to not be so hung up or get caught under the axles or get wrapped around the axles of people's axioms, because it's like,
Mhm.
well, I don't know, man. I've seen some crazy
Yeah.
shit when it comes to people and God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on both ends of that, right? So yeah, obviously, but who knows, man? But yeah, so like this moment that we're in, and we say been in for who knows thousands of years, this courting moment, there's a coming together and a going away, and so like, and it's not just because like one might seem like an enemy. I mean, I've had enemies that become great friends, and so to love your enemy, think about that as it relates to the bride. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling. But yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, Chad.
Maybe somebody out there can make. Yeah.
I'm gonna listen back to this and see if I can pick up what you're laying down, friend.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah,
because I know
somebody
there's a
can do
lot.
that.
I know there's a lot there. But like this is what I keep. People always they'll say something like something about union, sexual union or whatever, and I'm like, hey guys, don't you remember, like, this is all the language around this is the marriage supper of the Lamb. Jesus is the bridegroom, we're the bride, all this stuff, right? Like this is definitely, oh, my geese are being so annoying, sorry. But this is the language that scripture uses to describe it. I'm not sure about the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures because I just not as familiar
Song of
with
Songs?
them. Oh yeah, right. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's say maybe the transfiguration, what was happening up on that mountain, maybe that was just a bachelor party, and like Jesus was telling Abraham,
I love that. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know.
No, I love that. I love that. That's great. That's great.
That's good. The transfiguration as a bachelor party. I think you need to write a poem about that, Chad.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for letting me just ramble.
Anytime, Chad. You have. I get lots of insights from listening to you.
Yeah, me too.
So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good one.
See you later.
Chad. See you later.
So what time are you meeting with Kessie, Nate?
We talked about we agreed to talk at 5 o'clock our time. So.
All right. We'll see if you're still here by then, because it's the day, right?
What do you mean? Oh, right. What time is that supposed to happen?
I don't know what time. Well, for us, it's 10:45 or something like that.
Oh,
this
is it
morning?
10:45?
But it's partial for the West Coast.
Right. So it's not total for the West Coast. So
no.
The apocalypse will only be an East Coast apocalypse. I'm sorry to say.
What's it going to be like for Israel, though? Hopefully they don't have an apocalypse.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, Israel.
That's all they need now. Yeah.
I pray for peace.
Well, I'm gonna look forward to hearing that conversation. Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get into that or not. We have so much to talk about. We'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I definitely got his attention with my observation of this is one of the things that you missed. I'll see what you think of this. I was talking about being I spent the Sabbath with my wife's synagogue recently, and I went to those services, and as I was watching, there's a part of the service where they parade around with the Torah while they're singing, and then everyone reaches out and touches their prayer books to the Torah scroll, right? And it's like, oh, that to me, that's like that ritual, that image is like, that's the whole mystery of Christ. Like Christ is the Torah of flesh, right?
Right.
And the Torah of flesh is what we were all trying to. That is the mystery that is the mystery of Christ. That is the mystery of Christ in us that we were all trying to embody. We were all trying to become a Torah of flesh, as Christ has become a Torah of flesh, and that's what that is. It's like. It's desiring to participate in that image.
I went to the Antiochian Divine Liturgy there when I was down in Langley, and I haven't seen this done in the OCA, so I don't know if it just never was or whatever. But before the gospel is read, they always process the gospel right before the reading, right? So they come out with it, and it is the body of Christ.
We do that in the Anglican church too.
Yeah, so they come out. But in this Antiochian church, everyone touches the robes of the priest as he walks by. Same thing, right? Because the priest in the mass is standing in for Christ, so it's like, it's touching the hem of the garment. It's like, yes, it's the same thing. Same thing.
Yeah, it's an expression of the desire to see face to face.
It is, Nate.
Okay, all right. Talk to you later, Sherry.
All right. Bye, Nate.
Right. Bye-bye.